We're back in. So we're back in open and no rise and report from the close. Consent agenda, could I have that moved and seconded, please? Moved, seconded. Call the question, all in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Staff reports and other business information report, building report for Q3 2024, July, August, September. Arlene, yep, everybody.
Yes, my chair.
I'm just going to admit the owner for 7.2.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you can. Are you comfortable moving to 7.2 right now because of the owner still being in waiting?
The owners in waiting. Are you going to that? Because all 5.2 and 3 were all under consent.
Oh, those are all under consent. Thank
So
you.
you do
Sorry.
business arising from the
Perfect.
minutes and then 7.2 if that's acceptable. Oh, sorry, I'm the CEO, I think.
Okay, so the
We're moving all the way to page 44.
Yeah, we're on 7 because 5.2 and 3 were in consent agenda.
Right.
No, I missed one. What was that, 5.2?
We have moved to 7.2.
Yeah.
7.2.
7.1, which will be very
Okay.
fast.
Okay.
Oh, I don't have that here. Interesting. Yeah. CAO verbal update.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay, that's the way I was 7.2.
Okay, request for decision 7.2, notice on title. Construction contrary to building bylaw regulations. Habitat Lodge Incorporated Area C. Want to speak to that?
Good morning. My name is Farshan Dalwal, and I am a building official for the SLRD. Property owner, Habitat Lodge Incorporated, location 920A Gims Road, Electoral Area C. Some of the key issues with this property are a building official posted a stop work order on July 27th, 2021 for construction without permits. A registered letter was sent August 10th, 2021 with 5 building permit application packages and noticed that the applications were required by August 30th, 2021. And property owners were notified that without a building permit application, action may be taken to enforce the regulation or section 57 of the community charter may be invoked. 5 building permit applications were received September 27th, 2021 for 2 single-family dwellings, 2 mobile homes, and 1 accessory building. Property owners were contacted on January 31st, 2022 with notification that there are numerous zoning issues with their application. Owners were directed to speak with planning to discuss the issues. The property owners were contacted on March 8th, 2022 with further contacts to assist them with building code and building concerns. No further documentation was received from the property owner with regards to the building permit applications. I attended site yesterday, October 8th, 2024, and as multiple structures exist, several encroaching setbacks and 2 partially outside the parcel, and no permits were completed, staff request that a notice on title be placed at this time.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone? Arlene.
Arlene McLean, Senior Building Clerk. We received a letter from the property owner, Habitat Lodge Inc., Director Natalie Folks. So that came in yesterday. Ms. Folks has asked that the directors consider allowing her to complete the building permits and resolve the variances on the property within an agreed period, resulting in a building permit for the cottage to occupancy. Ms. Folks notes that there was further discussion with her designated agent, Phil Beauregard. Staff can confirm Mr. Beauregard did have numerous discussion and contact with SLRD staff. The last correspondence on record was in June 2022. Yesterday, October 8th, Ms. Folks submitted structural and design plans for the cottage as well as a septic filing. She also noted that she will be seeking a licensed contractor to complete the cottage. I would just like to reiterate that no further documents were submitted in the past 3 years in order for us to move any of the building permits forward. So that's an issue for us. And Ms. Folks wishes to speak to the directors regarding the notice on title.
Ms. Folks, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Hi.
Yes, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Hi there. Yeah. Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. I do appreciate that. And yes, it is high time that we do have discussions with the planning. When this first took place back a couple of years ago, back in 2021, I brought on Phil Beauregard, engineer, to help with liaising. And he's had, as you'd mentioned, these discussions with various individuals, and I'll be providing backup for that once he's back from abroad. These things take a long time to happen. It took me 1.5 years to get the a little bit more of a firm drawings from the engineer. Every task, it took the septic system about 1.5 years for me to make happen. I was out of work as well for about 1.5 years during that period. So it kind of put a crux in me being able to proceed. I didn't know how to proceed, and that's probably why I need a contractor to help me with this business, because I did not pass the builder's exam, because I'm not a builder. And I think professionals should be taking care of those types of items for somebody that doesn't have enough experience in it. I kindly request that it's deferred, this notice on title request that you're putting through. I think I do need more time to be able to put this together. I did gain employment at the end of May of this year, but I'm working myself out of debt from being out of work over the last couple of years. So it's just made it really tricky for me. I don't even know if 2-year deadlines for completing permit applications are as realistic as it might have been in the past, being that things do take time. COVID slowed a lot of things down. Being out of work slowed things down for me. Because I'm self-financing this project. So, it's really up to when I have work going on, and I usually do, but unfortunately the industry that I've worked in did have a collapse with unions going on strike down south. Didn't help matters. It really put a stall on anybody working in that industry. I guess I do need guidance from the planning department and the officials. I'm more than willing to work with you. I remember reaching out to you when I first sent out these, they weren't completed permit applications, but I sent what I could send in, what I was able to accomplish. But I just wasn't able to get all the bits and pieces together to be able to get that to you in that 2-year period of time, because every item does have a certain cost attached to it to be able to complete, because things just aren't done for free, right? So is this something that you would be open to, so that I could actually continue with the progress? I'd like to have, I realize with Phil Beauregard liaising, he was very helpful with a lot of things, and we sorted out a lot of stuff. But I think it's really up to me to sit down with the planning department and the officials and have those direct conversations, so that the clarity can be there for me. I have an understanding of what is expected of me, and so on and so forth. So I'm not giving up on the property. I'd like to continue. I'd like to live in that cottage. It's 24 by 26 feet. it's one floor, it's very simple build. I understand there are variances with other areas. I'm willing to have these discussions with you. I did before and I still do now. And I would like that opportunity for us to be able to have that FaceTime so we can have these meetings. And I would hope that you would grant that to me.
Okay, thank you very much. In your report, it said that two of the structures are actually on whose property? Is it overlapping? So is it on Crown land or?
It's on MOTI right of way. That's my understanding. I spoke, what was his name? John from the MOTI. He was very helpful. I spoke with him very early on, a couple of years ago, and he says, yeah, you're going to have to move those things, or, you know, you'll have to talk with the SLRDC to see, you know, they have their setbacks. You might want to see if they have a leeway for MOTI setbacks that would be required from them that would be acceptable. So, you know, and it's sort of like, am I able to get a building permit to at least complete the building so then I can then fund the other stuff that has to change? I understand the just so that you know, I had 8 different electrician companies come to my place and they all told me I had to put an electrical building up, a 10 by 10 foot building, or they would not help me out. And I didn't know how to place this building because and I'll be honest with you, I wasn't there that day and there was a misunderstanding. It was not placed where it was supposed to be. Now I understand it's on me. I get that. I understand that completely. And I am responsible for it. But unfortunately, that mistake happened. I didn't understand the severity of that mistake until all this sort of started brewing up. And I would like to correct it. I would like to figure out how we can make this work. The other building is a 5 by 7 garden shed that stores the wellhead. And I'm looking into a pitless conversion so that that shed could be removed. And it's just the pitless conversion well setup will be at that spot where the well is. So, you know, there's some things I know what I have to do, but the details of being able to make these things happen really depends on our meetings and us being able to have these discussions. And, you know, it's time, and I'd like to do that.
Okay, any questions for anybody?
It's just the owner of the property is Habitat Lodge Incorporated. What exactly is that?
Well, that's a corporation. It's the corporation that I'm the president of. And I bought it through the corporation. At first, I was hoping to have a glamping type of scenario set up. And I soon realized that that was not going to be feasible. And so, you know, it's just where the ownership is at this time, but I'm the sole shareholder of the corporation. I'm also on title as the leaseor. I'm also leasing to be living there from the corporation. So, and I have, you know, the rights to be able to develop and so on and so forth based on that documentation that's set up through my lawyers. So is that clarified?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And one question, if I may.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
If this building is on MOT right of way,
Mhm.
I don't see how we can have any say over that at all. We can't approve a variance onto.
Oh, I get it.
MOTI.
It has to move. It has to move. And I get that. I know it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a big mistake. It happened. And I do apologize that it went that way. Honestly, if I would have known what the outcome was, it wouldn't have happened that way. So the building has to be decommissioned from the electrical aspect. I'm going to have to put a pole in, switch over the hardware for the electricity to be able to accept that kind of system, right? And then take it from there and then either move the building or take it down. I have to say, I spoke to quite a few builders and workers, labor people that do this kind of stuff. And they're not that interested in taking things apart. They're more about building stuff. So I can't really get that much interest out of anybody either who would want to tear this building apart. I was thinking maybe I could move it as a secondary suite up top where the cottage is, but then that's a whole other project unto itself. I think these other discussions have to sort of, the whole ball of wax has to be sorted out. So then we can figure out what's the flow, right? Sorry?
One final comment, and if I.
Yes, go ahead, Tony.
This is not something that's come up in the last 6 months. It's a long-standing
Yeah.
issue.
Mhm.
Clearly, there are a ton of things that need to be done, and it's not easy.
Mhm.
And the only comment I would make is that if we went ahead with this, put a notice on title, it doesn't prevent any of that work from happening. It maybe puts a little pressure to make sure that certain dates are met and certain conditions are met. But I would be in favor of putting the notice on the title as requested by staff.
My argument on that, or my thoughts on that, I should say, is those extra costs of those type of things, you start putting penalties on somebody like that, it actually slows down the progress of being able to afford to move ahead. Now, I agree. Yeah, I've been a delinquent, but there's also a lot of naivety in there too. I wasn't aware of all these things that I had to do. I had a lot of advice from a lot of people I had no business taking advice from. I did try to get in touch with you guys a couple of times, and I didn't really get anywhere because it was very busy, I guess, for you. And I would prefer if you didn't put that on notice on title. I just would prefer if you didn't, because I think we can work this out without that happening. I'm also curious who interested purchasers and parties that would be looking at that. Is this the title has that on there, so purveyors of property for asset management purposes or whatever would have access to these things, and they could peruse and they go, okay, that one's going to be all right. Like to me, I find it's not encouraging. I find it's more defeating than encouraging.
So my question to you is, are you planning on selling this property then? Now?
No, I plan to live there until I die. That's it. That's my home. That's yeah.
This is, I'll run it by the rest of the directors, but my thought would be that we give you a 6-month sort of reprieve here.
Mhm.
But having said that, you have to work with staff
Mhm.
to get all this stuff corrected.
Mhm.
And it has to be in motion and completed as soon as possible. And if in 6 months staff comes back and says nothing has happened or very little has happened, then I'm going to support Director Rainbow's motion that we put a notice on title, but that we give you that leeway to get this work all done. I think that's a pretty fair way of doing it. So I'll see what the other directors have to say.
I actually didn't make a motion.
Pardon me?
I didn't make a motion.
Okay.
So
No.
Yeah, I've got a question for staff. Are there building permits currently?
We have applications received in the timeline that we requested them, but there's no documentation in order for us to process to a permit stage. So what was submitted was the application signed, an acknowledgement signed by the property owner that they would build to code, and payment for the application processing fee. And that's all that we received, and the survey plan showing us location of all the buildings, which reiterated that the buildings were not meeting our zoning. 2 buildings were outside the parcel line. And like I said, that's all we had. And we were waiting for more documentation, which was not received. So we could not process them.
Can I can I add to that a little bit, if that's okay?
You just let the directors here speak.
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure.
Director Needham, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to the building permits that would be required to be completed, it's likely that there would be variances required, and there would also be a need for likely a zoning amendment, because there are a lot of structures on the property that do not comply with zoning. There are the site is in excess of what is allowed. And so that is a whole other hurdle that would have to be jumped in order to legalize all of the uses that are currently on this property. So it's not just building permits, it's zoning, it's variances to zoning, et cetera, that are going to have to be completed and applied for.
Okay, well, I'm gonna put that as a motion that we give this lady 6 months to work with staff to get everything in order, so that in 6 months, they can come back here and say that everything is in order. I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay.
With a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
My suggestion would be that there's a meeting right at the beginning of the 6 months between the property owner and staff to go through it and produce a checklist, if you like,
Yeah.
and make sure that in 6 months' time, we're not being told, well, I didn't know what I had to do.
Yeah.
So that would be my suggestion.
Who's that?
Okay.
Okay, moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay.
Thank you. So we should just,
Can I just confirm?
yeah,
We have no other owners on site for the others, so we could move to, okay. We could move to, 7.7. Yes. If there were people.
you want,
Seven, yeah.
yeah, because we're at 11:36 now, so we don't want to run out of time here. Okay, so we're gonna readjust. We may have to get you folks back later after lunch. We have a lady waiting to give us some advice on how to do our job, so that would be very interesting.
She also saying she has time if you wanted to continue this and address Tracy after lunch.
You're all right?
Jedi mind trick that one.
Oh, good, okay, all right.
It's more convenient to finish this. I could stay as long as you need.
Oh, all right, so let's then go to 7.3.
My language.
Yeah. Request for decision, notice on title, construction contrary to building bylaw regulation, Smith Area A.
Property owner, Smith family, location 3788 Lillooet Pioneer Road, electoral area A. Key issues with the property. Stop work order was posted on June 26, 2020 for construction without permits. The property owners were contacted on September 14th, 2020 with notice that a building permit application was required by Monday, December 14th, 2020. Property owners were notified that without a building permit application, action may be taken to enforce the regulation or section 57 of the community charter may be invoked. No response was received from the property owner, and as the construction exists and no permit was completed, staff requests that a notice on title be placed at this time.
Any questions?
I'll move option 1.
Second it.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All question, all in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's, now we go to,
Because I think. Yeah,
no, let's go.
okay,
I
Yeah.
am.
terrific.
Sorry, are we moving 7.7 or?
We're gonna go to Tracy now, so that's
Something like that.
7.
Hi.
No, we're all right.
Sure.
Well,
I'm just wondering
we'll get
if
there.
someone doesn't want to stretch.
Yes.
You want to have a stretch? Okay,
2 minutes.
we're just gonna take, 2 minutes, have a quick stretch.
Do you get that?
Call this meeting back to order. Good afternoon, no, good morning. Tracy. So, would you like to start?
Yes, and I'll set the framing, and I would encourage each of you to jump in, because this was a follow-up to the first stage of governance work where I did work with the board as a whole and went through that governance check-in. And candidly, the SLRD is doing a very good job on governance. And as we step into this, the purpose of this is your CIO felt it was very important, and you know, the chair of this committee, the policy, to make sure that when we talk about governance, we're not just doing a scan of the upper level. The really out of respect for you as electoral area directors, to provide you with a little more time and candidly resource support to talk about what matters most in terms of the governance flow. And one of the topics out of this was, what are the terms of reference for this committee? The discussions from a flow perspective, I know that each of you got questions sent to you by the CAO, just sort of things to think about this committee, how the electoral areas are supported by the board, and whether there was an opportunity for any changes in those flows and authorities. I then had individual phone calls with each of you, and I do a lot of this work with elected officials, and I was tremendously impressed with, well, first of all, how passionate you are about your areas, how clearly you articulated the similarities and differences between them, because you've got, you know, like every regional district, this one's very diverse. You know, the electoral areas aren't a homogeneous blob of ruralness. There's really real difference in pockets in each of yours, and you're different passionate individuals doing this work. In those conversations, there were discussions about how this committee functions, certainly, and bluntly, you're very pleased with this committee. It's important to each of you to be able to connect with your colleagues, not in any way. I'm very direct, so I want to sort of, I didn't get the sense that this committee was structured to create an us against them in terms of electoral areas compared to municipalities. And I've seen that in other areas at different times. And that's something that certainly as a governance consultant concerns me. What I heard from you is that, at times you'd like to see more people seeing your communities and understanding your differences. And that's an ongoing challenge with electoral areas, especially with how spread out you are, is that the unique pockets and interests of your area candidly will probably continue to not be seen. And I think, municipalities feel the same way about their areas, but your geographies are so much more expansive. The other area that we'll talk about is how to navigate in this model, this regional district model, because it's unwieldy at best. And as somebody who does governance work across the country, it's better than what other provinces have. I work a lot in Alberta, and they don't have any form of regional table like this. They have counties that abut to municipalities. And so everything is a patchwork of boundary negotiations. You're to the west, you've got this, to the right, you've got that. And there are no tables set to allow areas with lower populations to add on to economies of scale in a way that ensure, the services that our rural areas get in British Columbia are, in my work, a real benefit of this system. And I think, it's one of the things that sometimes doesn't get to your residents. They see a lack of ability to make independent decisions. But because people aren't worried about local government like you all are,
they don't realize that there's big benefits come even with that lack of flexibility and autonomy that you're able to add on to others, and even the staff that you have access to. You're able to participate with your other partners at the table in funding them. I don't want to shy away from the fact that with the changing demographics in your region and new municipal directors around the table, that the dynamics are changing and real and
Sorry.
it's a happy ringtone. I mean, that's important. Do you need to take a break? Are you okay? I think that, you know, this group getting together and identifying where are the commonalities? Where would you like a little more authority over decisions? One of the sources of friction that comes up with the four of you, again, I'm not telling any sort of master secrets, is at times you feel that the board as a whole is mowing your lawn on things that are specific to your area. And the reality is in many, like that is the board doing its job. It still doesn't feel great. And so two things I'd like to achieve today, maybe more than two, but I would like to see whether there are decisions that can actually be formally delegated to this group or to you as individuals or to staff around, in particular, funding. You know, it was one of the topics that came up for each of you, that there may be areas where you're distributing funds in your areas that you have, they're pocketed for you in a sense, and that there may be ways to delegate either to your CAO or to this committee to make sure that when things do go to the board from the electoral areas, they're ones that do present a real risk such that the board should lean in and consider those items. So that's certainly one area. The second area is just making sure that even, you know, and I had discussions with Director Demare around this. What are the questions that you should be ready to answer? And, you know, the flip side of that is what questions should they be asking versus diving into all of these things? What are the policy questions that a director looking at an issue at the table, not just as relates to the EAs, but in some regional districts, they actually have a policy framework that these are the questions we're going to ask. The benefit of that is it helps you as electoral area directors manage the expectations of your residents. If they know the questions you're going to be asked, they should be ready to answer them on a request they make. And you can be their advocate more effectively. And I've got some examples if we have time for this, or through Heather, I can leave some examples of what other regional districts do to sort of sort through that criteria-based decision-making. Because I can, just from the work I did, is I can tell how passionate you are about the interests of your residents, each of the four of you. But one part of that is really candidly managing expectations around what is possible, that even a good idea, even a funded good idea, sometimes introduce risk to the board as a whole or the region as a whole, whether it's a resourcing risk or otherwise. So I'd like us just today to talk about some of those things. And there are other, you know, in the handout, just meetings and that sort of thing. So one of the things I'd like to toss over to you is, what does success look like today for the four of you? Because, you know, it was very important to the CAO that I be here in person. You know, not that you're not very good at Zoom and that sort of thing, but being relatively new to her role, being able to show her respect for the four of you was important to her, you know, but I think also, as much as I'd like to identify a couple of areas where you get a little bit more authority, I also know that there's terms of reference before you that are pretty common terms of reference, you know, just around the EA committee. But I wonder, just from a flow perspective, we can go through even some of the questions that you were asked in advance and go through them. But I do want to make sure we save some time for what specifically might be areas where this group or you individually could have more delegated authority, specifically around items like funding. I think there's some benefit to having that specific, and maybe starting specific is easier than starting abstract and talking around issues. I asked you this question, Heather asked you, or CEO asked you the questions. Apologies, I'm not always great with process, and please don't misconstrue disrespect if I am more informal than formal. Would that be a useful exercise and use of your time to talk specifically about some areas where delegation might be given to you individually or to this committee?
I'd like to start there. That seems a reasonable place to start, because there are some specific things I think we could take to the board as recommendations.
Does that work?
I agree.
Because that's sort of the other thing is that candidly, the level of service, this is a separate topic, I just want to put it on there. The level of service that your residents are getting from you as electoral area directors is above what many residents are getting in other areas. You're doing a lot for your residents. And that's a good thing. I don't want to, but I do think one of the topics that electoral area directors do need to consider when they're doing above what the job is, and is how do we ensure succession in your regions? The election is 2 years away. That is not too soon. I hope that you're all healthy and decide to stay in these, but if you won the lottery, I use that instead of hit by a bus. If you won the lottery, one of the things that is important is about the processes and expectations of these roles, such that talented people in your region see themselves as potential directors in your area as well. So I think just having a bit of a discussion midterm is not too early for that. The closer you get to an election, in some ways, these are harder discussions to have. But just sort of thinking about what is the bare minimum that an electoral area director needs to be able to do. And because I know that that is a very different question than what the four of you are doing. You know, in discussions with you, the four of you are doing a lot of extra volunteer work in your areas, as well as being directors. And it's credit to you and a value to your residents, but I think it's important to talk about what would somebody at the minimum need to be prepared to contribute to be in these chairs. My suggestion is that there's some strictly, you like these meetings. I think there was a question about the frequency of these meetings. There wasn't a tremendous amount of uptake on moving them to less frequently, just from discussions with you. If we streamline some of the processes, you might find that that's something you revisit. But my recommendation is at this point, that's not a change that I would recommend you make. If there's some, you know, work that can be delegated or some systemizing, you may find that that's not needed. And my recommendation is, are you paid per meeting as? No, it's a flat. Yeah, my recommendation is there is other work that can be done. So reducing the amount of meetings would allow you to, you know, it wouldn't be a change in compensation, definitely from my perspective, because when I look at what you're doing, you know. Anyways, talking about delegation. What is the number one area where this group would like, or where you individually would like more authority to make decisions at this level without it going to the board? Anybody got a specific they'd like to put on the table?
Yes.
Okay.
Tony, go ahead.
I got 3 areas under funding. One of them is PILT funds. My argument with that, at the moment, now let me back up. The board made some decisions about how PILT monies would be distributed. So that's done, that's in place, and we don't need to revisit that, it's there. To change that is a major task that the board would have to undertake, and I don't challenge that at all, I accept that. So the board, having made decisions about the PILT funds, some of them are designated as select. Those ones, we have authority, we have delegated authority that we can make decisions about how that money is spent in our areas, and it goes to the board as information.
Okay.
So it would be part of the consent agenda. If a board member, having read that, wanted to ask a question about why was this $5,000 given to this particular organization in Area D, if they wanted to do that, they can. And then it would be up to us to justify what it was, you know. So that's the select funds. We also, in the northern areas, we have these things called PILT funds, which are separate from select, even though it comes from the same source. And for that, our northern directors have to bring it to us, get approval here, then take it to the board and have it approved by the board. That to me is an unnecessary step. If we need to change the name of that account from PILT to Select 2 or whatever, then we should do it. But the effect, I think, of any change should be that those decisions are just like the select funds. They're made here, and the information, it goes to the board for information. In area D, the only PILT funds we have does need to stay in place as it is right now, because it's a joint fund with the District of Squamish and Area D. So that would necessarily have to go to the board. So I'm not suggesting any change there. So that's my recommendation about PILT funds.
I'd agree with that. Is there any reason why we couldn't do that?
That being, let's be precise here, when you talk about that,
That the decisions, of course, we should leave the select the way it is. It's working fine and it's a small amount of money. It could be a larger amount of money. Payment in lieu of taxes, the bigger chunk. I agree with making the decisions if they're pertaining to the electoral areas, they should be made at the electoral area directors meeting. And then the board could be informed as a matter of regular.
For information.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That works, that works. I agree with that.
Can we make motions as we go along? I'd make a motion that we recommend that to the board.
Right, I think my recommendation would be that the outcome of this would be a more fulsome report that would include those desires of the EAD committee, and it could be reviewed.
Okay.
Or if we do individual ones, it would be a little intrusive to the board. If presented as a report
Okay.
from a consultant,
So
like they might land.
can I make a resolution here that we include that in our report? That we include that specific recommendation in our report. I don't want to get through to the end of the discussion and then have to go back and try and pick out what we agreed with and what we didn't agree with. If we agree on that particular recommendation, let's note it now and say it should be included in the report.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
and I think we can achieve both is where everybody's sort of on it. My suggestion is some of these things are going to interrelate a bit. So let's just make sure we don't leave this meeting without saying, just confirming each of those things. And I've made a specific note on that. I just want us to be like, some of these things you might even say the CIO can, like some of these things might even be able to be easier than what we're talking about. So the intention is critically important and I don't want us to lose that. So we're talking in circles.
Can I just interject just as a reminder that every motion is a fuel and the fuel is an action, every action, it increases staff time and effort. So if it is managed in a more efficient way,
Okay.
with the trust that it's going to appear in a report, would likely reduce the credibility amount of staff time.
So I don't care how we do it. That makes, I understand what you're saying there.
That's right.
If we as a board, if we come to a point and we agree, and you say I've noted it, put it on there, fine. Can I continue with the funding things? I have the same comments about the amenities funds. Now, I think that just applies to area C and area D at the moment, where we have
A different name.
pardon?
Just payment in lieu of taxes money comes from the north, right? Comes from areas A, B, and Lillooet. We're talking about the BC Hydro Fund in the Bridge Seton watersheds.
That's northern PILT.
That's
The
northern.
southern PILT comes from the other DC Lake.
Yeah.
They tend to call it amenities. And I don't think any of that money goes into general government, right?
But amenity funds come from developers,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So area A and B could definitely acquire amenity funds. If somebody develops a property in either one of those areas and like staff negotiate an amenity.
Okay,
So whether it's money to go to parks or whatever, right? Say like with Wedgwood's, amenity funds that they have given have been specified to go to recreation in area C. Same with your amenity funds now coming forward. Amenity funds are different than the built funds, right?
Yeah.
But you could definitely have amenity funds in either A or B.
At the moment, the only sort of officially designated amenities funds as a fund that is contributed to each year are in area C and D.
Yeah.
And they come from run-of-the-river power plants, so they're time limited. But if you look at the criteria, the one in area D says it has to be spent in area D. So the board doesn't have any choice over that. It has to be spent in area.
And it's the same with area
And
C.
the same with area C.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our process at the moment is if I want to spend amenities funds, I bring it to this committee. And then we recommend to the board that it be approved.
Yeah.
I want to cut that out. I want
Yeah.
to say that could.
You make those decisions.
We make the decision here and inform the board.
Yeah, and it goes to the board for information. I totally agree with that, Tony.
except where you're sharing it between.
No, I'm not sharing it. Amenities,
You don't share?
No.
Okay.
There's no choice. Suzanne's told me that, it has to be spent in area.
Do you
D.
mind if we just step back one? How many different, can we just label these pots and the different ones? Just because I'd like us to go through each of them. Is it working or is there a change? Versus,
Yeah.
do you mind just
The first one was PILT.
Pills?
ILT.
Yeah, pill regular.
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Yeah, no, but we have those subsets. Northern.
And.
You had different subheadings of pilt.
Well, there's a southern PILT.
Well, yeah,
I just want to unpack these.
Yeah.
Because it seems like there's different treatments of them. So even if
There
we
is.
labeled them the same thing, let's, and even, talking about this naming convention, because if we're not, regardless of what the funder calls it, how we refer to it, do we have a Pilt North?
There's the northern PILT, yes.
Okay, and by the way, my green just was not, there's no significance to that color on this. It just didn't. Pilt North. What else do we have?
And then you can put PILT and then in brackets select.
Pilt
because
Select.
The select funds come from PILT.
Okay, good, thank you. What else do we have? Amenity funds?
general select.
General Select.
That is.
It comes from PILT,
Okay.
general select.
Is that different than Select? Is there two different?
It's different,
Okay,
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
for all
animal
four,
select.
it's for all
Good.
4 areas.
okay. We have amenities
amenities funds.
and
yeah.
are those by EA or are are there 4 of them?
No,
No,
the two that exist are in area C and area D. And they're specific, they come.
C and amenity D.
And amenity, and they come from run-of-the-river power plants.
C and D?
Yeah.
And they're from
and
power.
from developments.
Do you get, I haven't,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get money from Miller Power,
yeah,
Rutherford Power, money from Wedgwood's. And now I've got money coming from a development,
so
a subdivision up in Divine. Person's put in 5 lots, so you get money from them, putting in 5 more lots, I get money from it. So any of those developments, those staff negotiates with them. That's my amenity for the area.
and the situation we have in area D is that the developments in Britannia Beach and Furry Creek. That money, there is a suggestion by the board that money not be spent in area D.
Yeah, well, that's wrong. That's just, in my mind, that's wrong.
Our policy at the moment says
Yeah.
that amenities fund should be spent in the area.
Area
which
that
are
it's,
developed.
that it's collected.
Except for the biggest one, Northern Pilt. Where 75% of it goes into general government. That's,
And that's different than amenity though.
That's,
Yes, it
that's
is.
different than those amenity funds.
So Pilt
See that?
North is 75% goes to general?
Approximately.
No, what happens is we get help for SLRD and DC Hydro gives it. And then
And then
there's,
it gets
and then there's a
distributed
policy,
after.
there's a policy that splits it all out. So general government gets some of it, planning gets some of it.
It's best probably to talk to them, through the chair.
Yes.
It's best that we not really go into how it's split up, because without finance here, I think it would be good to talk to them as individual funds without tackling
Yeah.
the split.
The goal of it or the split of
Yeah.
it, but these are the funds that come out of, like, this is the output after distribution, there's a north and a south.
Yeah, and
Or-
so if we're looking at what we can affect, we're looking, the specific things I was saying there about things that we want to approve that we then have to take to the board for. They're really, the decision has already been made that that money is spent in the rural areas.
Mhm.
This whole thing about whether it's fair, the way that PILT is, that
Separate,
goes back
different
to,
workshop.
that's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
And it's a huge thing, you know,
Yeah.
it's,
But not the topic today, but a significant,
yeah,
we're talking about how we're using our slice of the pie, not how the pie is sliced.
that's right.
Okay.
That's absolutely right.
All right.
So are these the slices of pie that come to you as individual directors or to this group?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
community works funds,
Yeah,
that was my next topic, was community
Okay.
works
Okay,
funds.
yeah.
Because again, the board passes a resolution about how those funds should be
Mhm.
split up. But the way it is at the moment, you know, we then have to go back to the board to get approval of how they are spent in the rural area. And I don't think we should have to. I think that can be decided here.
Because the criteria have already been decided by the board.
Yeah,
And what was the other one where that had already been decided? You mentioned another one where that was in the same category up here, where the criteria had already been.
oh, the amenities funds, there's criteria for the amenities funds.
Okay.
my opinion is, and it's similar, same as yours. Any money that is allotted to Area C, because it's allotted to the Area C residents. So whether it's community works funds, amenity funds, select funds, whatever, that money belongs to the constituents of that area. The money that's in Tony's area or the money belongs to their constituents. So if I bring forward a motion to spend money on, you know, fixing up a park or, you know, recreation or whatever, if that money's coming out of community works funds for Area C, then I bring it to this committee here, we agree on it, then it should be passed and we should have the authority to do that without having now to just pass it off to the board and have a discussion whereby the municipal directors, so to speak, can vote against it and vote it down. So that money belongs to the constituents of the area that it's designated to, and they're the ones that should benefit from it. And so if this committee here agrees to that, then it just goes to the board for information. We have spent X number of dollars fixing up the Anderson Lake docks. And that money came out of Area C amenity funds, community works funds, whatever. They shouldn't have the ability to say, no, we don't want to do that.
Do you mind if I poke that a bit?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So first of all, they have the legal obligation to either in advance or after the fact do that. So what we want to do is get some delegation of criteria by which they're going to defer to the delegated authority here. I just want to push back on, there's a difference between who the money belongs to and what it gets spent on, because at times what an individual or community group might want to have, even if you have the money, there are other things that impact the region. So I think I don't think we're saying different things, but I think if we think about what are the questions. So first of all, what do you ask before you support something? You know, and Sal, I know you've got like some criteria that you and I discussed, but We've got finance applies some criteria. They have to, there's certain things they just have to do to get that money. And we agree that's working, that we're not unpacking the finance criteria.
Yeah,
They have to meet the legal obligations that the SLRD has set out.
Yeah,
the community works fund is definitely like that.
Okay. Because first of all, if you don't support it, does it come forward? If you as an individual director?
No,
no,
No, it doesn't.
Do you have a tight intake process as a regional district? Like, is there a form somebody, or do they just drop it off on you like a carrier pigeon and in you walk to try to frame this out? And I'm not suggesting, like, my suggestion is, what is the, you want to make sure the amount of work is commensurate with the sophistication of your, resident organization and the amount of money. But we do want to make sure that there's some processes so that people know if they're going to be knocked out later,
if you want to talk about work, just look at it from the point of view of work. Take an amenities fund application, so somebody applies to me for something, I will typically phone Suzanne and say, can I use the money for this purpose? If I'm not sure, can I use the money for this purpose? And we get good advice from Suzanne. It saves a lot of time. If you take that step, it saves time. So once I've brought that to this board, staff have had to prepare that for this agenda. And then we make a resolution. And now that, as Heather just said, every time we make a resolution, that adds to the work that staff have to do to then take that to the board. And I cannot remember one instance and I've been here 10 years now, where the board has questioned an amenities fund expenditure.
So what's the problem?
It's just that it's never been, there is.
Delay.
It shouldn't be a problem, but there's a delay there and it's extra work.
Because that was one of the things that came up in my discussions with you, is not that you're power hungry and want to, is that what is the most expeditious way to get decisions made quickly? And some of that might be, so first of all, and I'm not the boss of you, so when I suggest things, just understand, I'm telling you what I see in other areas that may be useful here, is there is some value in having a simple online form that tells people, like, the Suzanne questions. We don't need to ask Suzanne each time, because probably those questions are pretty standard. I think Sal, you said, are you a registered, this, or is it a resident, or is it a company or a not-for-profit? A lot of organizations, and probably Heather and Suzanne could streamline this, where it's push a button. I'm a not-for-profit. There's then a few questions that, are you registered? Yes, no. Like, I'm not talking about a convoluted 28-page form we're imposing on people. I want to be clear. This should be simpler than what's happening now. But I think that notion about having the intake happen before you even, it tells people whether it will succeed or not.
See, we used to all have plans for our areas with our priorities, remember that? And we would review
The
them.
kinds of things you intend to fund.
Yes, and in an ideal world, this would align, and this is something I really have a bee in my bonnet on now, is it would align with your official community plan, right? So you could go, does this align with the official community plan? And, is it, which would kind of point towards priorities, I think, and when we had those planned, and they were very different, our 4 electoral area lists of priorities. And then the other common questions, like, this is a nonprofit, it's providing a service, and all those things that we just do in our heads every time, right? And yeah, okay.
And even though what's in your heads, remember, as we talk about succession as well, the more we get this in, and by the way, I hate rules. Although I'm a lawyer by training, I am not somebody who loves process for its own sake, period. But when it streamlines both managing expectations and moving things forward.
Sorry, I'm just thinking that it might be there in the select funds, because I know some of what those limitations are. And is it just for making mistakes? I think I've actually read that in our documents, that what they're intended for, right? Yeah.
So, each fund has a criteria, which is what the finance department aligns with. I would say where we say, well, we just send it to X. And they'll answer it, send it to Suzanne, or I call this person. From the perspective on the other side, it sounds very efficient for people to pick up the phone. What happens on the other side for staff is that they have phone calls that they have to manage that have questions about funding. They have emails they have to manage about questions about funding. They have emails coming in not through an area director that have to be managed about funding. And the idea of streamlining it all in one place will address that, but it will also address out the lack of follow-up, which is, are you a nonprofit? Yes, what's your nonprofit number? Done. And you can't save the form without that. And that saves a lot of time. And especially with departments like corporate services, CAO, and the finance department that have this coming up in 7 different ways.
So now a non-profit wanting to apply for a grant, it's now going to have a form that they've got to fill in to do that.
Chair, yes, it would be similar to that, but I think I wanted to be clear that it would be easier than a letter in a lot of ways, because it would be the same information that would be in the letter. It would just be streamlined in a way that can be received and processed. And then it's not missed. I mean, I've heard, I didn't see this before it got on. So that the process can be built in, that area director is aware, like it's built in, so it's not missed. Finance has said, I didn't see this request. I don't know what fund it could come from. Well, that can be dealt with in the workflow of that form. And it will be easier for the person.
And if
What's
they
your
can't
business?
do it,
What's your business name? How much do you want? What area are you in?
and staff could support exceptions if somebody didn't have the sophistication, because that will happen at
Yeah.
times. Where, anytime we automate a process, we don't want to leave vulnerable individuals or entities behind. But that would be the form that staff would be filling out too, with the help of that individual.
See, the way I tell my constituents now is, if you have a request for funding, send me an email detailing how much money you want, what you want it for, and then I forward that to the CAO, to finance, and find out whether, I'll say, usually, I want this to come from select funds, I want this to come from amenity funds, I want this to come from community works funds, and they will determine whether that works. And I think that works. If the explanation is there, the request is there. A lot of people, even small community groups, for them to start filling out forms and that's putting more onus on them and time, and they don't have that. So I personally, I think I like the way I do it. Maybe others don't, but I think it's an efficient way of doing it, and it gets it to the right people to answer the questions of who they are, what they are, and why they are. Tony.
What I heard just now was that people will be sending this form into the board.
No, to staff.
To start.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sending it into staff.
Yeah.
Why? Because that is going to delay things. That adds time and adds work that's not necessary. That if it says on our website, we put on there, have some little template there, that the request comes to the area director. That makes more sense to me. I don't need something showing up that just before a board meeting. It's the first time I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, that's not what. The data shows, I'm not the boss of you, and again, the system you choose needs to meet the needs of all of you. It is less work to have a standardized form. I think it was Director Mack mentioning, when people are writing these emails, they're going through the criteria anyways. They're actually answering these questions, and then you handle it, and then staff have to sort of figure out what's in there. There's often things missing too, but then what's missing is never clear on an email or a letter. And so then we have to circle back, and I guess the other thing about this is, and again, most regional districts have quarterly intakes. They don't have this happening all the time, or annual intakes, but I would suggest if you're going to do this is having this be a perpetual drip is inefficient by design. There will be emergencies. I'm not suggesting there's not.
Hold on.
No, I guess.
One of the biggest problems I hear from people in municipalities is that you can only apply once a year or twice a year or something like that. And sometimes these ideas come up in little community groups. They want $500 or something like that. So if we're gonna say that only comes once or twice a year, then we need to be given a little more authority than $500.
Yeah, that's
So
the way to do it.
maybe without any reference to anybody, I can approve grants of up to $5,000, something like that. Is that what we're doing?
We're not suggesting intakes right now.
Just, can I say something now?
Yeah, sorry, Sal.
First of the time.
Okay, one of the differences that we have in the north, which is great from NDIT, is grant writers. So pretty well everything that we do goes through there. If it doesn't go through there, it goes through a director report.
Yeah.
So that we're fully informed on what's going on within the northern area. So, and I've looked at other regional districts. Let's just take TNRD. How much discretionary funds do they have? Not close to what we have, especially in the north. And we're talking this year, probably $250,000 of discretionary funds. So we're a totally different region than other areas, mainly because of the Ridge River Power Project. That we get all that northern.
And our grant writer knows exactly what the criteria are for the various funds.
And the grant writer is somebody who works for the regional district?
No,
Yeah,
we're
well,
not, we're not.
I'm just
putting this on-
understanding this.
We're not putting this on staff at the regional district.
Okay.
This is somebody that through funding, the SLRD helps us apply for the Northern Development Initiative Trust
Yeah.
grant writer, $8,000 a year.
Okay.
And then we supplement it
Yeah.
with some of our discretionary funds. So, but she knows, and you know, if I have groups that I don't think will include all the information that staff are gonna need, I'll send them her way.
Yeah.
And also often they'll say, no, they do their own letter, or they've just done their own letter, or letters come in directly to staff and bypass us altogether. All these things happen and it's working okay, I'd say, overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the issue around quarterly or half yearly or yearly is not an option for the northern area. And I don't think it's an option for.
That was a me idea, by the way.
We're not discussing that. We're not discussing intakes. If we actually get a system that is incredibly efficient, maybe in a couple of years, we go, wow, you can.
Yeah, so-
we're not discussing intakes right now.
Thank you.
So let,
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay.
That's off track.
I just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
for
thank
time.
so let's
You
go
don't get
talk,
afraid.
let's talk about at the board level. One of the things that they've got to do is make sure that everything's legal and everything isn't gonna do any harm to the SLRD,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So if we put those processes down onto the electoral area and this funding program that we wanna have approval to do all that. So that we know that what's happening is illegal. So we put those criteria in, because currently those criteria aren't there. And I shared you my directive report that hasn't been actioned yet. And that's the critical part. Because if we can do that, then we can do this without the board.
So I'm just
So
gonna
that
unpack
we
the
get into
process.
the information where they just get the
What
information.
Director Demare is saying that we have criteria for some of these. We don't have criteria for all of
Only
these.
for what is to be spent for.
Yeah, the more we identify the questions this group's asking, the easier it is to get delegation.
Yeah.
You know, we've already done the work on these things. These are the questions we're asking. Does it meet, you know, you don't need to be asking, do they have the business license? That's gonna be, you know,
We don't have business licenses.
or the charitable
Number,
building
there's a charitable business
yeah.
number.
There's some process things. I can tell you that, you know, you already know what these are, the questions you're asking yourself. It's more just making them visible. what is the diligence being done at this table such that the board feels it's comfortable? Now, the one check and balance is there does need to be one piece of work that your team does, which is notwithstanding the criteria. Are there any risks? And I would suggest that this works when there's no bigger risk flagged. If there's a bigger risk flag, this committee recommends to the board and the board considers it. And one of the keys to getting delegated authority is to talk about when the limits on it. If there is any resource clash or it's I think when you and I were talking, is it infrastructure interdependent such that doing one thing over here, the fire departments, we know that those are riskier areas because we want to make sure we keep interoperability and connectivity. So there's certain things that staff might flag. And do we all agree that even if we got authority delegated, there's certain times where that would need, but it would go by exception, not by design. And right now everything goes, and it would be, here's, and this group would consider whether that, like you come to this group still and you go, yeah, this is one the board should lean into because it has an impact on regional growth or infrastructure or even just staffing resources.
I just a couple of things on that. I made the comment earlier on that I could phone Suzanne and she could.
Yeah.
That's maybe 3 or 4% of the time.
You're not calling her on the regular.
No, most things are pretty clear, and it's just an occasional thing that it's not.
Right.
So that was one thing. And this group, we have a responsibility, and before I was on the board, there was an instance of select funds being approved at the EAD level for a private group, for essentially a private club, so that
Tracy and her two best friends kind of thing, not a charity or.
And the equipment bought wasn't available to the community in general,
Right.
Which I think was wrong.
That would be one of the questions, yeah.
So I'm not suggesting that everything that an area director brings here just gets rubber stamped. We have a responsibility to question, to look and make sure that things are being.
And I think we discuss things pretty well at this table, and we always have.
We challenge each other.
Pardon me?
If I'm one of the directors here, do you poke at me?
Mhm.
This is where that happens sort of robustly, why that?
Yeah.
Because the other piece of this is when we talk about delegation, what can just Heather approve? If it's what's a recurring sort of
$100 for Remembrance Day.
Remembrance Day?
Like, just and it wouldn't be me approving and not talking to the area director.
No, but what doesn't even need to
But
come
we-
here? If something's a recurring expense that is regular and annual, let's also protect this board's time. Because we talk a lot about not bringing stuff to the board, but, and I don't mean to be crass, we also do need to make sure that good work being done in your areas though also is recognized and celebrated. I don't want to lose that piece of it, not suggesting that you need it for your egos, but your community pride comes from those sorts of things. So even if we delegate that authority, we want to make sure that there's a celebration for what's happening in each of even if it's a small amount, inside the CAO's delegation. I just really would make sure you keep, how are we messaging that happened? Because sometimes even being on this agenda is one way we do it. So if it's not going to be here, how do we make sure that profile? Apologies,
No, that's okay. I just want to make a couple points. One of them was, I want to be really clear that when an area director sends something in and says, yeah, they're a nonprofit, staff do not take that as your work being done. That's not your job, that you don't have the authority. And as a finance person, it couldn't be like, well, Tony said they're a nonprofit, I signed the check.
So the due diligence is still checking.
The work you're doing, which isn't necessary. In the sense that it is necessary in your decision-making skills. We could front load that for you in a way that has authoritatively been checked by the person who needs to check it. And it's not an offense to you, it's by design for her professional membership that she can't be like, Bob said Tony said they were a nonprofit. She has to check it, and which makes sense. I just want to make a couple points. So when you got it, you would know totally vetted. And it's happened in a way that if the number is there, then it's vetted. They've said it's vetted. And I would say 90% of them have already been vetted. We know them. They've already been vetted.
It's a repeat.
It's a repeat. One thing I want to be really difficult and say something is that what I'm hearing from staff consistently is how it's managed now is using up a lot of their time. So what might feel like 2% for you is multiplied by 4 or more, and it's taking up a lot of time. And because each director manages it differently, it takes up even more time. So,
Yeah,
and so the request from staff is to have a process that is streamlined, that, and their question is, could it just be as simple as, instead of seeing a letterhead with letter, you get an email that is in the same format every time. And it happens, like, when they hit submit, it could be like, the computer could go area A, send it to Sal. It just, instead of them emailing you and hitting submit, they did hit submit, and it doesn't go to staff in a queue. It could go directly to you if workflows
Well, it
built
should.
into the computer, yeah.
If you're gonna,
Yeah.
I don't have a
And that's
problem
the
with
question.
with a consistent
Yeah.
approach, because, you know, when I joined, there was no guidance, and that basically, and I just made up my own rules.
Yeah, which totally makes sense.
So if something sort of consistent is introduced, you just suggested where some people will find that quite easy to go to the board website, fill it in, There are plenty of people in my area though that won't find that necessarily the easiest way to go. They want to call me about it. It's easier to talk to the area director than it is to go through the board. Go through the staff, go through the you know, and so if I have access to that form, to a form, instead of saying to a community association says, we'd like to buy a couple of picnic tables, I'll say, okay, there's the form, fill it in, send it in to me. And then I can look at it, I can check it, and I can make my determination of whether I think that fits, and whether I'm prepared to spend the money on that as well. I mean, maybe it's an organization that's already had quite a bit of money from Area D, and I'm wanting to spread the money around somewhere else. So, you know, I can nip that in the bud before it ever comes anywhere else.
I think the most important thing we have to do is keep this as simple as possible for our constituents to access us. And I really think the way we're doing it now, I have no problem with it. In my area, and I'm sure you guys are the same, I like to get those responses from my constituents, because then I can either phone them or we may have a phone conversation about something. But when it starts getting pieced out so that I may not see that request until it's sort of been vetted by staff, like we're supposed to be, what we're talking about here, it seems, is we're trying to streamline everything to save staff time and all this. I don't think we're accomplishing anything, to tell you the truth. I may be old and worn out, but I like it the way it is.
Just on what you're saying there, it builds relationships. Without those relationships, the SRD loses. So having those one-on-one communications with them is critical prior to anything moving forward. So without that, everybody loses because you're not building relationships. So one of the main functions that any electoral area director, no matter where it is building relationships.
Okay, I'm just gonna call time here. Lunch is here, so we should do that. And it's hot. So let's just break for let's break for 30 minutes and have lunch, and then we'll come back at 10 after 1. Okay, we'll call this meeting back to order and we will continue. Tony, go ahead.
I'm looking at this and listening to what we have to say, and we've started to go around in circles, I think, you know, so I have a suggestion. That go one of two ways. Either we as a group can write up something, provide some suggestions and give it to staff. I think maybe a better way around would be for staff to prepare a report with for us to consider. A report to suggest a streamlined way of applying for funds. So,
Right.
Thank you. That's what I absolutely hoping will come out of the report from this, the summary of this meeting is some of those suggestions. So absolutely.
okay. But,
Or no, you don't want, you want
No, no.
me to write?
What I'm hearing, if I may, is, first of all, and through the chair to staff, what I'm hearing is how important the relationships are for the electoral area directors. That having a process that is understandable and streamlined, they're open to, as long as it doesn't lose some of these other things that really matter. And so I think this was specific to the process of intake. Sort of the memo versus the letter versus the questions. That was really that providing some assistance so that the group can look at a thing and critique it.
Yeah.
Versus brainstorm an idea. Hearing the underlying interests that you as electoral area directors want to make sure that your local flavor, that you've got that input, and also that you want your value to your residents to be recognized in that you don't want to be speed bumps in the way, but you want to be able to assist your residents and your organizations with finding funding whenever possible.
yeah, and I would make the suggestion now because I see that as being separate from a reconsideration of the authority of the EAD committee. I mean, we are already doing those things, but clearly from some of the comments you've made about staff and time and so on, that could be improved without changing anything to do with our delegation authority or anything to do with our terms of reference. We would just have just address that one particular issue, which may save staff some time and make things easier for us. So,
Through the chair, absolutely agree. I'm kind of being strategic here by putting it in this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Just because when you're requesting more delegated authority, you're also in the same document vein saying, look at the steps that we're going to ensure that there's confidence from the board that, of course, I with this kind of process, of course, we should be giving delegated authority instead of individually asking for it.
So can you note that as a component of what will come out of this? But I think what I hear the Director Rainbow asking is, can we put a pin in that and move on, knowing that it's captured versus it's still loose and being discussed?
Yes.
Am I understanding that, Director Rainbow, properly?
yeah.
So whether we put this all into sort of one action at the end of this session to the CAO, I think that's good feedback. But if we could just sort of get that placeholder here, and then because I still think there's discussion we need to have about specifically this delegated authority. We talked about the intake.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make sure that the resolution that was passed that I submitted back in 2021 is part of that. Because that's never been actioned.
If I may, let's bring that forward, because 2021 was 100 years ago in most people's world. So just to refresh people's memories and even just to ask staff to look at that work that has already been done and see where it fits with this. Just because I don't even know if Heather's seen that.
Which one? I wouldn't know because there were so many from 2020.
Yeah. So if there's input to that, please.
What is it?
It was about funding and criteria around it. Where, I mean, I could have to find it to read it, but it talked about you have to be a society in good standing, you have to have general liability insurance. Some of them may need to have co-insured with the SLRD, such as what the DRVCA has. If they're gonna be doing any work on Crown land, do they have permit, do they have tenure? And there's a whole list of items there
Yeah.
that kind of covers the legal aspect for the board. And those are some of the key pieces.
Yeah, okay.
Is that if we can take care of that, then that's one of the key pieces to this.
If I may jump in, I forwarded that to the CAO just now. We had been discussing it, but if I may I think these are useful questions. Does it need to be a legal organization? Does it require insurance? You know, and it's listed. And there's a number of those, require a resolution. Can we fund a third-party organization if it benefits our community members? So there's just some questions here that I think could become part of that. You know, one of the questions is, should other government agencies be funding this? Like, you know, are we the last place they've gone to or the first place they've gone to? I'm paraphrasing for, you know, any lawsuits, like there's a risk, there's just some good questions in there that I think, you know, are probably, if not part of the intake process, might well be considered. And those are questions that the mayor's asking his people, but if we just had it sort of yes, yes, no, no, no. And a no doesn't mean that necessarily a request is tossed out. It might mean that there's an extra step or it's not the right fund, but just what I'm hearing is that taking this, you're open to streamlining as long as it protects the personal relationships and as long as that as long as the character of your areas is included in this. And don't want onerous restrictions being put on applicants. So
my biggest concern is let's not make this so bureaucratic and so difficult for people to access funds for their projects of whatever kind they are.
it's got to be proportionate.
We gotta keep it
Yeah.
simple and keep it so that they can get access. And I totally agree with, they need to go through their area director first, bring that idea forward, and then go through the process of applying for the funds, however that may be.
Are you open to keeping an open mind on that? Certainly the director needs to be engaged, but just can we,
I can see this just getting really, really bureaucratic.
it's really bureaucratic now.
Pardon me?
It's really bureaucratic now with the multiple touch points. It just may not feel that way.
Yeah,
With
well,
sort
I
of an
guess maybe
email that
we're
gets-
used to it as it is, but, you know, I just feel that,
You don't
Yeah.
want this to become convoluted and bureaucratic.
no, I don't.
Here's one, I'll put this one out. It hasn't happened for a long time. But I had a situation where I put in a request for funding and I got a call from the CAO, not this CAO, a previous CAO, saying, I don't want to put that on the agenda because you've already given enough money to that association.
Yeah. That's
As far as I was concerned, that was nothing to do with the
That's an
CAO.
authority problem, not
No,
a project
that's,
problem.
You know.
that's your decision to make.
Well,
To bring it here,
Not
and
staff's.
I don't mind if this group says, hey, you've given 75% of your money
Yeah.
to that one organization, what's going on? Fair enough question.
And maybe it's very justified. Right.
It's still a fair question.
Yeah.
I don't want staff telling me, no, we don't want you to do that, or you can't do that.
Be really careful that we're going into a conversation about personnel and performance of.
No, it's not personality, that's,
But what I say is, that is a personnel issue that I hope wouldn't happen in the current.
you would like to, so moving forward, let's not talk about people that came before us, but you would not want, you would have issues with a process that questioned your discretionary decision-making.
yes,
However systemized we're making this.
yes.
Really love that sentence. Can I?
Go ahead.
It was something that has been shared with me through Angela about procedure, and I want to clarify, which is the chair makes the decision of what goes on the agenda. And I mean, you see it always.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think I've had one thing, like, it's very rare that things that qualify for an agenda don't get on. One comment was that the area director decides whether or not to put that funding forward. That funding can come through without the area director. So if the area director is like, nope, I don't like you, you're not getting it. This isn't about you guys. It's about removing the person from the process. It can still go to the chair and have it on the agenda. I just want to make sure everyone knows that
Thank you.
if there's a block from an area director to get a funding request on the agenda, that person can go direct to the SLRD and to the chair. And the chair can decide to put it on the agenda.
And similar to something going to the board would be hesitant to approve something absent the recommendation of that, but it's not a legal requirement that the area director support something.
Yeah.
Technically, but it certainly would be it would be a large factor, I would think, in any policy framework around decision-making. There would have to be a particularly compelling reason to do something in a region. And the regional district does that as a board, like there's sometimes things that are imposed upon your regions. Anyways, I just think what we're talking about is agendas, so that's.
And yeah, and that whole business of what, when things get, I've come to, or not come to the meeting, but I've got a package where there's a request for funding from my area, and that's the first time I've seen it. So that needs to go.
So keep that in mind.
We had a process that was the same.
Keep that in mind, yeah.
What happened?
Yeah.
No, but the rationale was, we got a letter addressed to the SLRD, so therefore it had to go on the SLRD board and it couldn't go to the area D director. I think it can go to the area D director, so that should be part of this whole consideration.
And I think that can be cleaned up relatively, from more misdirected mail if it's funding, that it comes through.
And it's merely to expedite the process, because if you have some advance notice of a request coming up in your area.
Yeah.
At least you have the opportunity to do a little bit of footwork and homework and know how you might speak for or against it at the meeting.
Informed
which
decision making is
might
good.
help board come to a better decision, so.
So I think that the CAO has identified that if we've got systemized, and again, I want, when we use these words like process and systemized, we are not talking about creating bureaucracy. We're talking about streamlining processes and consistency. We're not talking about adding time. And we want to be really disciplined about that, because what I'm hearing is we do not want to fix a system that is working, at least for the four of you, with a system that works, that is worse. I have also heard, however, your respect for the fact that what the four of you experience isn't the end of the story. There's also an inside the organization piece that you're very live to hearing more about, which is really what we're talking about here, is what can, and I do want to acknowledge that respect, because sometimes with elected officials, it's, well, it works for me. And I just want to, acknowledge the tone I'm hearing is just at least being open to the fact that your piece of it is part of it. Because we've got the applicant, we've got your experience, we've got staff's experience. And what we want to do is make sure we don't lose beneficial stages, and that anyway, so I think we're good on the process. I do want to talk about, and the more you're focused on process, the more trust, the easier it is to have delegate authority, because if there's sort of a rigor around that. And you guys are applying rigor. When I talk to you about how you're making these decisions, you are really looking at these applications. So this isn't about, it's just about, candidly, this should be process, not personality. Because the four of you are very experienced, and just making sure that the organization has continuity about what are all the great questions you ask, and how do we make sure that staff or the next director knows those. It goes to that succession topic.
I've got my little system, which is different from the other three.
Yeah,
And if we had a form, and I deal with community associations in a number of, in areas, as you say, each area is different. But if I just made sure that everybody in those organizations knew that this is what we do now, you're not sending me an email with a logo, you're sending me this form, and then occasionally some other little group will pop up somewhere. Well, that's fine. I can just.
You can help them with that too.
So that would suit me. I'd be quite happy with that, because it doesn't add to the bureaucracy. It just streamlines.
And you can try
Yeah.
things and see if they work too. Remember, like sometimes we act like we're,
Mhm.
you know, we could try something for 3 months and see what the feedback is on it. And then, you know, improving these processes. But we've spent a lot of time on back here, which isn't really the meat.
Right,
It does enable you to have more confidence from the board. You know, we've spent a lot of time, first of all, looking at how we work before we've asked you as a board to look at how you work. We're doing our own sort of work first,
right.
making sure we're tight, efficient, and process driven. It's not whether you like the applicant. It's about whether the application fits.
It's worthwhile.
Yeah, so we've got that. Now, on these, we've got some discretion given and some criteria that you know. Which one of these would be the biggest area where you'd like to have the board apply deference? Or are they all kind of the same? Like, are there different risk factors in these different pots?
I don't think so. I mean,
No.
you know, each set of money is specific and each set is as important as the other.
Okay,
You know, and it's up to, we'll say with Tony and I, we don't have the same amount of funds or areas of funds to deal with as Vivian and Sal, but I think the ones we do, I mean, are, to me, my amenity funds, community works funds, select funds, each is important as the other, and I determine based on how much money I have in each account, which one I want to spend, right? So if community works funds, if the money can come out of that account, then I would go that way. What I say to Suzanne is community works funds first, amenity funds, area C, amenity funds second, select funds third. Because it goes in the amount that I have in each account, right? So, yeah, that's the way I figure. And then there's some things, like replacing a fire hydrant or replacing a water meter or that's some of those are pretty big expenditures. So that would come out of community works funds. I wouldn't use amenity or select funds for that. Select funds are more for, in my mind, you know, community groups, sports, kids' sports teams, stuff like that, right?
but do you have them apply to each of these funds, or do they just apply and you tell them which fund works?
They just apply for the funds and then I'll tell them.
They just want money and you choose which fund.
So, and then they'll send me an email and say, you know, we would request $2,000 for a field trip.
Yeah.
I'll say, okay, fine. When you request the money, ask for it to come from Area C select funds.
Yeah.
So
that we you know, we sort of have the process of does it comply and that sort of thing. What's it for generally? How much? And then, you know, you or staff actually look at the pots, you know, where might it fit? Because some of these have more restrictions.
yeah, exactly. But
I just had a really strange kind of situation. I needed a commitment for some money. So that when I went to meet with the Squamish Library Board, I could say I have this commitment. So the only way I could get a commitment in time was to take it from select funds and bring it to this, where it should be coming from is amenities funds. But I took it out of select. So now what I plan to do is.
Okay, don't take me down a long path here, mister.
No.
You're gonna be creative on how your pots get allocated.
Yeah, and as far as the people receiving it are concerned, I don't care. It's just a dollar figure to them.
yeah,
So
So I guess those are all easy. You've got the money and it fits in all fours. The other questions though that do matter are, even though it may be a small amount, if it relates to asset management, for example, if it connects to the water system, there's certain things that no matter the amount and that sort of thing, you might sort of list the things that should go to the board. And again, this is about confidence, is we will make, you know, if it connects, you know, like which ones will
Regional
you,
implications.
are you not asking for, just sort of showing the board that you get it.
So Yeah, during our conversation, we talked about that.
And what did we talked about,
And what I talked about was that infrastructure for
Yeah.
tax services.
Yeah.
Like water, sewer.
Yeah.
Et cetera. Could go to the board.
Yeah.
Where anything to do with community groups goes to the EAD.
yeah. And we could also.
Because if you take a look at the Community Works Fund.
Yeah.
Staff actually have to fill out a form.
They developed that form
They develop that form.
for us, I believe.
And at the beginning of every year, budget time.
Mhm.
They're the ones that say this needs to be get done. We need
Okay.
this amount of funding for that.
Which money, where are we asking or taking money from your pots already,
Yeah.
like to, so that
So
what's
the
left?
Community Works Fund basically has to go to the board.
Yeah.
Because of the way that it's formatted.
Okay.
Now, the other the built funds on the northern built, anyway, there's criteria what it can be spent for. And a lot of it's got to do with infrastructure. There's other pots of money, but going back maybe 2-3 years, we actually put in there the community groups.
Okay.
So very similar to what Select is.
But I think one of the ways to even do this, and again, Heather, I'm not trying to put a lot of work, is just look at some of the previous decisions and say, which ones would we see going to the board? Now, Russell, you talked about the fact that there's a funding group in your area that
Right.
does some decision. What's that group again? I apologize, we were talking about this, but you've got a committee that meets and talks about your
PEVS,
PEVS. How do I spell PEVS?
Pemberton Valley.
PVUS, Pemberton Valley Utilities and Services.
And- Because that's separate from this.
Yeah.
Where does their money come from?
Taxation,
Okay, go you guys.
pardon me.
You guys have this own.
So, go ahead.
I would recommend with Peeves keeping it out, just because with the recreation
Yeah.
changeover, it's gonna need a govern.
Yeah, but there's a model of decision-making there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That, in terms of sort of discretionary decision-making being made in your area, that's separate from the board of this board's.
Well, no, yeah, so, but
Yes, no?
any decisions we make at PEVS, they will end up going to the board.
Okay,
And it's more for information. than
Okay.
anything
I gotta
else.
say,
We
the
don't.
decisions are made. I
Yeah,
can't
oh, yeah.
remember one being reversed.
No,
so we have a model, I guess, where the board still hears it but doesn't dive into this.
For PEVS is a weird one and.
So don't
it would
use it
be-
as an example?
There's 2 votes on the PEVS. It's Director Mack and
Okay,
and my.
Director Richmond, and Director Richmond is the weighted vote. Director Richmond's the mayor of Pemberton. When sitting on the PEVS board, he had his mayor hat on.
okay, so that's
So
a
when
bit
there's a tie,
confusing.
sometimes it goes to the board, and then in that case, in theory, Director Richmond has his SLRD hat on, and the vote could be different.
Right, fair enough.
But the
Okay.
vote is the same, is that?
How,
So back to that thing about community works funds.
Mhm.
So that goes to the board again, but the thing, it comes to the EAD before it goes to the
Yeah.
board.
is that helpful?
Because, we make the decision here and pass that recommendation on. But once again, it should only be going, if we pass it here, the spending of that money on a project in one of our areas, then that should just go to the board for information, in my mind. It shouldn't go there for a wholesome discussion and then have the board say, no, we don't like that, we're gonna turn it
So I'm
down.
gonna push on this one a little
Yeah,
bit.
go ahead.
Because we talked about the nature of what we're funding there being different. I think there's a discussion we can have about, the types of questions the board needs to ask, but when something hits that table, it is the board's responsibility, individual director's responsibility to feel comfortable enough supporting that. And again, if we show our work here, I think that creates some opportunities for that. But if something goes to the board at law, there is no subgroup. Now, if it's going just for receiving it, I think we can manage the expectations a bit, but it is every one of those directors, if something goes wrong with any of these things, it is not electoral area A, B, C, or D that is paying for that. It is the regional district as a whole. So that's where some of these ones that have risk and interfacing.
So the thing is, with those community works funds, the requests for that money quite often comes from staff. So from our environmental services
Yeah, yeah.
department, they
We
would
use
come,
it for this thing.
they would come and say, we need X number of dollars to buy another pump for the Divine water system.
Yeah.
For the well. So that money or that request has already been vetted, so to speak, through our staff.
Yeah.
And they're requesting it of the Area C Community Works Fund
Yeah.
pot. And then that request comes forward in a report or
Yeah.
whatever, right? So it's already, to me, it's been vetted by our staff.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know what's going on in my area, so I would say, yeah, that's absolutely a first class deal. We need to do that, right? For safety, for whatever.
Yeah, so what's left is your point. It's already gone.
Yeah,
through its fields.
exactly.
So again, I think this is a good discussion to have at the board as a whole, once we've sort of done a little bit of this work and we're going forward and asking, because you can't tell them not to engage. At law, you can't. But, you know, here's the questions that, you know, at the policy level, here's what's left there. You know, at a policy level, for example, and, you know, I've shared with, you know, Heather, some different regional districts actually list the policy questions. You know, does this create any risk with other projects that we've already committed to? Because even when the money's there, especially if this is a project we're doing versus just something we're funding, you know, there are good policy questions that maybe the board could ask. What you don't want them to do is to go, well, I talked to Joe on, you know, like it's when we get into the weeds, but I think there's a how question or discussion we can have in accordance with this delegation. That delegation doesn't mean everything is out of reach, because even what's delegated can be asked about. What we're
See-
looking for is making things more efficient though, so we're not wasting time on low value agenda items. And so
One thing
Let's go back to that community works, that started off at the board. There's a ton of money, and the board has made some decisions about where that money is going to go in terms of the areas. In terms of taking a chunk of it out and putting it into transit or something we committed to. So those decisions.
That wasn't community works funds, Tony.
Oh,
That was a government grant.
oh, but that
was a-
Community.
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
The name
Okay.
goes in the lingo.
But so the community works fund, I know I've got X thousand dollars sitting there. Typically what'll happen is I'll get a message from Omar and Ed saying, we need to change the grinder pumps in Furry Creek, we need to put a new this and that. And if I've got a question, I trust them. If they're telling me that if they don't replace the grinder pumps, I won't be able to flush my toilet, then I think that's a pretty good use of the money. So I'm agreeing with Russell that the board has approved that the money is going to be spent in Area D. Staff have said this is a priority. We've got to be aware of asset management and all of the things that they're concerned with.
So, okay. So
I don't think it should have to go back to the board.
So if you're saying if it's, you know, and I think to the CAO, I'm curious about this. So if there's a funding source that's already been discussed, it fits within the purposes, the staff are supportive of it and don't see any additional risk. Is that something that, and again, maybe not purely delegated authority, but just how do we streamline this process so that we can, you know, is it part of a CAO's report?
See, the one thing too, you just said about
Oh, I don't like when it's
about
just.
risk, you know, future risk or whatever. There's future risk in everything you do. So if you put a new pump in the Tony's grinder station, in a week, that pump could have a problem, right? A year down the road, it could have a problem. So there's always risk involved with anything mechanical or otherwise. So I think, yeah.
The risk I'm talking about is we put a pump in with a flow that is greater than the downstream can handle. Like, it's not so much about the risk of the thing, it's a systemic
Yeah.
risk. That's more what I'm thinking, because you're right. There's a risk with everything we buy. It's more about a systems risk outside of the geography is sort of more where, but staff would be flagging that presumably.
I'm gonna say, what are we paying staff for?
Yeah.
They're the experts.
Well,
I'm not an expert. If the expert says to
There
me,
is a full form.
Mhm.
And just add another line item.
Mhm.
What are the risks involved? And I'm not even sure if it's already isn't in there.
Yeah.
So the form is already there and
Community
it's staff to fill it out.
So that
I
one,
think that's a wide open question. What,
yeah,
when you start, what are the risks involved?
Well,
My God, I mean,
if we look at workload, we've started at the board, the money's been allocated to areas.
yeah,
So staff have already been involved and done some work there.
Mhm.
And then within my area, staff say, this is what we need to spend that money on.
yeah.
I don't think that needs to go back to the board again, because we're creating more work by doing that.
Yeah.
And what
They've already approved.
typically, who's the expert? What are the board gonna say? What does staff say? What's staff recommendation? We've already done that bit. You know, there's no
Yeah,
one,
so,
our board
I
like
think the
to.
CAO's got
I
it.
think you better hear from Heather.
Chair. through the
go
chair.
ahead.
What could be done is flagging that if the decision is made against what staff recommended, that it go to the board
Against what staff recommend.
against.
That's,
Oh.
I think that's a really
Okay.
good,
Sure.
yeah,
So you could build in, what you're doing is kind. What we wanna do is go, I want this delegated authority. What we really wanna do is go. This is how we're going to manage the responsibility of the delegated authority that we think would be more effective if there's here.
Yeah.
And here are the ways we're gonna protect the decisions that are being made, that it's based on a process. And that's one of them. If the decision goes against staff, then it goes to the board. And I know.
I'd never thought about arguing with staff on something like grinder
that's-
pumps. and
I
things
know,
like that.
but they'll bring it up. What if?
I agree.
Yeah.
If I were to say to Ed, no, not buying that, I want to build a new soccer field. And then we're putting the asset at risk,
Mhm.
then yeah, there's got to be a way of
Yeah.
dealing with that.
I really
Fair
like
enough.
that. And even the
enough.
fact that it hasn't happened, it gives a comfort to board members.
Yeah.
That there's not a lot happening.
Right.
You know, that you haven't quashed a risk. You know, so this is by exception then, the majority, if you got that delegated, the majority would be done. And there is still a path.
Mhm.
Where
Mhm.
where it can go to the board if
Yeah,
it's an
that's right.
unusual. And so really what we're thinking is, what would be the unusual things that would lead
Yeah.
it to needing to be a board?
I mean, the example I gave just now is a frivolous and stupid one, but
No,
there
no.
could be a situation where I disagree with staff.
Yep.
And yeah, and if the process then is, well, it goes to the board. And then, yeah,
Please.
sure.
And just to give the big picture of what the board's concern would be, and this addresses it. Some of the board's concerns when it comes to things at EAD that don't land on the board agenda is that they don't have a chance to have that informative, wholesome discussion, that caucus that happens here. So this is a good opportunity to say, when it is something that is against staff recommendation or more, that it does go to a larger group or a larger majority Democratic vote.
Mhm.
Because with a smaller group you have, the more opportunities you have to exchange votes, not this group,
Yeah.
but when you have a group, you can go, hey, you know what, cover me on this one and I'll cover you on that one. And that doesn't happen here, but they're not gonna look at it from a south grade, they're gonna look at it, looking forward to the future, building this and building guardrails into giving more.
Because the four of you will not be the only people at this table if this policy is able to be implemented. It will be different humans. And again, so just the more we sort of address any objection to delegation, the easier it is to get it. So
Yeah.
if, I just want to test, we are suggesting that if it follows staff advice, if the funding is there, if there's no significant risk flagged by staff, because even if you approve it, there may still be a discussion that staff recommends having at the board. But this would be an exception, not everything. Just, we think this is the right thing. It's a new piece of equipment that we've never used before, so just a heads up. But there still can be a referral to the board if you think, if staff think there's a bigger discussion, or you think it's a bigger discussion.
Sure.
Through the chair, and also you can put limits on the amount.
So what are the amounts that we're spending in this fund? Like, what's the range? What's the biggest expenditure under Community Works right now?
Oh, I'd say 100,000,
So
maybe even more
this
than that.
fund becomes big ticket.
Cause I know I put up 100,000 a couple of times.
Yeah.
What's the usual?
I don't think there is a.
40, 60, that's.
If we were under 50, would that take, like, what's the size of the funding, or does it really vary by area?
Well, if we go to 7.2, we can.
No, but
Yeah,
Yeah, we get about 52,000, so.
like, because we could even start with a small amount. Like,
Yeah, up
say,
to
less than
50,000.
10, less than, and what you could even say is put into the request of the board. We'd like to see this grow over time as we,
Sure.
as we establish this, but starting with a smaller amount.
You wanna start with 10, that's too small.
No.
Okay.
no, that's way too
30,000.
small.
50, 30? Like,
30, 40, 50, yeah. Goes pretty quick.
I would say 50 at a minimum.
Yeah,
Because now with the community works funds, they've opened up what you can spend that money on.
Okay.
So you can spend it on the building of a fire hall, the buying of a fire truck.
Yeah.
So we're talking,
See, now the interesting thing about those examples you just gave is those may be well be ones that do go to the board.
yeah,
Because they relate to, like, I would suggest there's gonna be some categories that still will go to the board.
yeah,
Like water systems, fire equipment, like that kind of thing. But let's see if we can figure this out. And does it make a difference? So say 50,000 is the figure we're using. What if it's your last 50 and it's February? Because you're gonna come to the board as a whole and ask for it, if there's almost a relative to how much you have.
Mhm.
Does that, am I right on this? Is that if you blew all your money in January and February, you'd probably go hat in hand to the board as a whole?
Area A and Area D went minus this year.
Okay,
yeah, generally,
how does that happen?
No.
Commitments, it's a
Okay,
bit.
yeah. I do not want to know your bookkeeping.
Whereas
Check is not out the door.
The other funds we're talking about, there's some sort of judgment that I'm making whether I want to push it forward
Right.
and so on. With the community works, it's usually
staff.
staff
Okay.
saying, this is what we want to spend the money on, and I generally don't get into an argument about it.
Okay, yeah, so
Well,
that,
it has been used for cultural and recreation.
so what you're saying is that even that interoperability piece that I'm talking about, if staff are satisfied, if staff aren't, it could go to the board. But just that, anyways, it's something, we don't have to perfect this. If we get some of this authority, we can be conservative in year one and bring more stuff forward, saying we weren't sure on this one, is this the kind of thing that we could do on our own? Are you comfortable when we talk about amounts?
I think the amounts might, at this point, whatever this format is, it would also go to finance to, I didn't want to bring finance into this conversation because I don't want it to be like, oh, we can't do that.
We're at the how, not the,
Yeah.
like, we're at the
Exactly.
whether, not the how right
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
And we understand that there may be legitimate impediments to what we're doing.
Exactly.
Not that they're trying to be difficult, but when we test this against them, there may be some wrinkles. So we're brainstorming the best case. So this one, Community Works is already coupled with a staff report. Some of these things go straight to you, to this group, right? Do you bring them here, or do they still have a staff report written about it?
Not necessarily, rarely there's a staff report.
The
Because we want to minimize staff reports for their own sakes,
Oh, yeah.
like,
the PILT. I use a lot of the PILT for infrastructure because I don't have a lot of,
okay,
I don't
Community work
get
stuff.
very many community works ones.
Okay.
So sometimes I'll have them do it, or I'll have them write it and I'll grab it and I usually do direct reports for those.
That's good for PELTs, yes. And I want to make a note that from feedback from staff with director's reports, which is when a director's report is written, it triggers a lot more action from staff for a number of reasons. One of them being it's been directly requested that no director's report have something requested that actually can't be done. Which had happened.
What's a director's report?
It's what staff always asks for when we want to
Do something.
suggest
Engage in a
something.
project.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's your application effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's used for engaging in a new project. So when a director's report comes in, what finance and whatever it does is, okay, what is this project? How much work is this project? How much staff time is this project? Where would it fit on the work plan? How would it actually move different priorities?
We're not even at the, is it a good idea? We're just at that, could we do it if it was?
Yeah, and then give that feedback, because it helps the directors to not be. You don't want the directors in a position where it's like, well, I wish I kind of knew that before I put this report together, because I just in public got shot down. Because staff had 7 really good points, but if they just talked to me beforehand, it would have been a more efficient or not like
So
director's report.
Uh,
So when it comes to
Guys.
reports, yeah.
Sometimes you have to make a point and actually have it on the agenda,
why?
just to get it on the agenda, because it's that, I'll just call it relationship building again. It's critical that what the community needs is actually spoken to.
What the community wants. We haven't yet decided it's a
Yeah,
need.
so you can do.
Like it might be a need, but I'm gonna suggest just from a good governance process, you should not be bringing things unless you're willing to unequivocally put your name and reputation behind it, you know, and if it's not,
Yeah.
but if it's not going to
Yeah.
succeed, if you know that, you are setting the public up to lack confidence in your colleagues. So we want to have this process in place where the odds of something being successful have been assessed a bit. You know, I was sharing with you, Heather, other regional districts actually have the criteria for projects. We're moving away from funding now. Into, you know, what are the questions we would ask about a project? You know, do we have, is it consistent with our plans? You know, in their case, they have strict, a regional sustainability strategy. It's a regional growth strategy. Environmental. Is there a source of funding for it? Is it supported inside the area and broadly? Does it have a regional impact? None of these are yes or no. I want to be clear. Like something can be, you know, does it have a regional impact? The answer can be no. It's just, it's a factor. And something that's in your area and benefits the broader region should be sort of elevated.
Right.
Over, I'm not saying that a small, like little project shouldn't go forward, but when we're looking at these things, the risks are in there. Is it our job? And again, that's not, you know, sometimes, especially in rural areas, there are things we do that actually aren't, you know, as long as they're small and not risky. But again, it's a question we should be asking at the policy level, and I can share that framework.
I think,
For the types
So
of questions.
we could,
I think that we're, you know, we also talk about, when we talk about roles and responsibilities, right? Because that, to me, that's almost a precursor to all this, is our roles and responsibilities. Once they're clearly defined, what our roles and responsibilities are, because we don't have that. You can go into the Local Government Act and they got a little blurb on it. But in reality, there's not much there. So for the SRD, for the electoral areas and for the board members, the rest of the municipal board members, we need a proper, good roles and responsibilities. We may not need it, but we got to develop for the new people that are going to be coming on. When you talk about, you know, moving forward as we move forward.
Yeah.
So I look at roles and responsibilities to be key.
So I don't know about that, Sal, because
Yeah,
you're an elected official, you're representing your constituents, right? You know, I might bring forward ideas that I don't agree with because my constituents are asking me to. I mean, roles and responsibilities, that sounds like a job, that sounds like an employee, right? We're not employees. And we don't have employee benefits, you know, we're paid, it's sort of a compensation for, in recognition of our time, but I'm not sure you can nail that down
Well,
beyond.
a good example, I'll share a good example, because we shared a couple of roles and responsibilities from,
Position
you can-
description sort of.
you can-
yeah,
you can
like,
call it
I hear
whatever
your
you want.
concern.
you call it whatever you
Saying
want,
it very well.
No, that's
right?
That's good.
But in it, it was very adequate, like you were about contacting, one of your, things that you can do, or should be doing, is talking to the various ministries, this, and this and
Well,
that.
very few, none of those would have that for an electoral area director. That would be as a
Okay.
board member as designated by the board. But
Right.
generally, talking to ministries is not an EA function, an EA director function. Unless it's
Sure.
been directed by the board.
It was in one of those.
There's other, but when we pull out those threads from other things, there's context around them, just to be clear. But I think nobody on a regional district board should be talking to a minister about regional district business unless the regional district board has decided that that's, like, you can do it as a regular resident, but just,
Okay, well, let's take a look what I did last week. What I did last week.
okay, here we go. Director
you.
Yep.
I'm serious. It was all things that aren't related to the SLRD.
Okay, so that's volunteer work. That's great.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's what I did. But I used my SLRD hat on.
And there's risk around that, and I would suggest that it's an area that I'm not saying you may be using it very, very well, but none of you should be using your regional district logo or business card for individual volunteer work unless it's been, and I'm being unnecessarily restrictive because it's looser than this, but when it comes to advocating, that is something the board does collectively. Not, because otherwise you would have every director using the logo for their municipality, their area. And
She's gonna have an extension on the pool by Friday if that's the case.
and I want to say, nobody can stop you as individual, committed and passionate community members from having these discussions. But, and again, I'm a lawyer by training who doesn't scare easily. That is something that would scare me. And you may be doing it well, it's still a significant legal risk to have individual directors using the SLRD name to advocate or influence. And the minute you check it with your board and they say, good, go. That's all it takes.
Yeah, but you just said, I did something last week which was nothing to do with the board, but I used my board hat. That's contradictory, Sam.
Yeah, well,
That's.
I'll tell you what I did. I met with Cascades Forest District on salvage logging, fuel treatments, and geez, what was the other one there? Roads. And
Grass
roads,
seeding, yeah.
thoroughly.
And has the board talked about that being important?
In the OCP,
The
if you take a look at all those things that are related, that are not related to what the SLRD does, it's the SLRD will advocate, the SLRD will advocate, the SLRD will advocate, the SLRD will
The
advocate.
SLRD is not you though, right?
Yeah, well,
Absent a motion, the SLRD is not you, and you shouldn't be using their letterhead to have meetings. I'm not saying that you haven't been using your powers for good. I don't want to because I think your intention is 100% positive. But imagine if somebody without pure intent was doing this and trying to leverage things in their area. It just creates huge risk that you are successful, ironically, and you get all these things, and then there's other pieces that flow out of it. Please.
A result of that is that staff are saying this is a risk, this is a risk, this is a risk, because when those meetings are had with the SLRD hat, when the board hasn't given authority to it, the staff's job is to constantly flag risks, and this discussion is good to have for that awareness.
Yeah.
It is behind the scenes, staff are aware that there's risk to that.
And I think that some of the ideas
okay,
just
so
from,
what you're saying, I can do it without my,
you are a resident in your area.
okay.
And I hope the distinction is, now you got to be careful that you're not sort of side-eyeing wink, wink on this. But at the end of the day, even in talking to some of the work that you do for your residents, it's not necessarily work that the next you would have to do. It's work that you enjoy and you're good at. Like the job that you have is to show up at meetings and make decisions.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if I do
I'm
that,
not trying to pick on you, by the way, like, I enjoy this.
let's just work through this. So if I'm doing it on my own, I don't have to tell the SRD, CAO nothing, then.
What is it that you're doing? If it puts the SLRD at risk or arguably compromise them, you're outside the law. Because your fiduciary obligation as a board member is to keep the interests of SLRD first and foremost.
See, and the way I look at that is,
Well, roads has got nothing to do with the SLRD. So Maudie roads, forestry roads,
I think we're
but
going
if
down a
you're
rabbit hole that is
advocating for
unique
that
to.
stuff, I think that the best thing for any of us to do, if we're gonna go and advocate or go to a meeting, like if I go to Squamish to go to a meeting with forestry or whoever, all I need to do is let the CAO know, let the chair know.
Is there anything that's flagging that puts this?
Then I say, okay, I'm going to Squamish to have a meeting with Dave Southam about how many times the Forest Service roads do or don't get graded in this area. Fine and dandy, way I go. And you know, and the chair knows. I don't think you need to
Yeah,
get
but let's
written
just check.
permission from the board to go and do that.
So, so what flags for us is, it hasn't been approved by the board, so there's no approval for your expenses or because you're paid for a meeting. But like Sal and I talked about this, because I said, hey Sal, can we put this in advance to the board so you have permission to go and then your expenses are covered? And he chose no, I can do that after the meeting. So you do have that choice to go, I can, after the meeting, say, I went to this meeting and I'd like my expenses covered.
And that's
with
expenses.
myself
Removes the
personally,
permission to go to the meeting.
I go and have those meetings, not very often, but when I go to those meetings, I don't put in a meeting expense. All I put in is mileage. And that's from the day I started. That's what we sort of agreed on.
Okay.
If we go to meetings,
But from the day you
Because-
started,
pardon me,
when you started, like I see from Mickey's history too.
Yeah.
You were being paid by the meeting and by mileage and meals if necessary.
well, that was,
And then it
yeah, that
switched,
changed
right?
before.
Like at least 10 years ago, it switched to a salary.
That-
And I do recall
Before that,
well,
yeah.
being required to be at a meeting in Shalath, I think, and asking about mileage, no, because that's still within area B, so you're supposed to be able to get around in area B, but if I'm going outside of area B.
No,
it's mileage, it's
We're
on.
getting into the
Yeah.
weeds a little bit on
Sorry.
expenses,
Yeah, no,
but I think also.
I can answer that later for you though, because there's good answers.
I think there's also, I mean, this is all gray, you know, like
Yeah.
but because going to a meeting is one thing. Advocating for something is a different thing. You know, like you go to meetings all the time, you're in community events and that sort of thing, like being present is one thing, but why are you there? Do they want something from you or do you want something from them? All I'm suggesting is that as we talk about delegation, so too goes trust, that you're also part of the larger group. That, you know, in the same way as we're using, you know, asking for more autonomy, that you are aware of, and again, I want to be really clear as we're having this discussion, I am not suggesting in any way your intention, like you're just literally trying to get things done in an expeditious way. And I want you to hear that even when I'm saying yikes. But sometimes we don't see that our impact is that there may have been a bigger ask for that ministry on behalf of the region as a whole. And once that, you know, once that request has been made for one area, we've lost that place. And it may be that as important as an ask is for one of your areas, candidly, and at that time and that year, it may not be more important than the others. And the flip side of that is it might be, but you got to go through, like advocacy definitely should not be being done like piecemeal.
One thing too, we keep saying about, we're worrying about the next group coming into this. Well, personally, I'm worried about this group right now. We're the ones that are elected to this table right now to look after our constituents. When the next group comes in, maybe it'll be the same group, you know? So I'm not gonna worry about the next group. And if I don't run next time, then the person that, you know, I go and try to talk into running, you know, I'll make sure that they're up to speed on where we're going. And I'm sure they'll know where we are going and the things we've done. One thing you can do, and I've done this in the past, is you get finance, Suzanne, just print out the spreadsheet of all the money that Area C has spent on different projects and put it on our webpage, right? So people in Area C can look at that and go, oh, this is all the money that was spent on all these different projects. Wow. Busy year. Well, every year is a busy year, right?
Yeah.
So I'm
No,
not gonna worry about the next vote coming in.
I'm using that phrase because what works by personality might keep working by personality, but the systems have to work for different people. So that it's not so much that I'm not worried about this one, but you know, you've got your rhythms, and candidly, it's easier to change when there's change. Than, you know, like the patterns that you're falling under, you know, we can tweak them on the margins. I do think though that sometimes it's awkward to talk about how residents know what benefits they've got by being a part of the regional district. And it feels a little self-serving to put that out. But remember, that's not something you do for yourselves. You do that for your residents, and you do that for the regional district, because there's limits on the decision-making you have in your areas, you know, by being part of the regional district. But holy mackerel, there are economies of scale your residents get. They get services there's no way they'd be able to afford if they had to build their own little system for this and that. So I think when we talk about how we share our successes, that's a really important part, not about getting reelected or not about getting credit, but about, and what one organization does is they put it actually into themes. Here's how recreation's improved in our area. Here's how our supports for livability, our asset management, like they've got the why it matters, not just the list of the project, and just 4 or 5 sort of things like, you know, we've improved recreation in area A, B, C, or D.
But then we get back to staff time.
Yeah.
So right now, if I get Suzanne to put out that spreadsheet, so to speak,
Through the CAO.
on everything that's
Everything's through the
done.
CAO, yes. Yeah.
So that's already put together.
You can
So-
bundle it.
You know, it's not staff having to spend a
Yeah.
whole bunch
No,
of
my point
time.
is you can just sort of say, why did we do these?
Yeah.
Recreation,
Yeah.
like this.
Well, people can read that and they can see X
sure.
number of dollars was spent on, you know, Pemberton Meadows Field.
Yeah.
Well, okay, on the Anderson Lake docks, on Gates Lake Park, blah, 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 right?
Okay, so I want to finish this because I think this is a piece of work we can accomplish today. And
Yeah.
I think we want to talk about the terms of reference before we end today.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Look at you getting all excited by terms of
What a
reference.
comment.
So we've got, I think, you know, an idea around community work. We're gonna check with finance. We're gonna marinate on this a bit. It'll come back to this group for consideration. These have criteria. Would it be amounts that we would want to put on these? Like, or is there any of these that really have to keep going to the board that we're not talking about?
Some are just information. And some are recommendations.
Okay, so which of these are information that you do know offhand?
Select,
This one?
both select, I think.
General select, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then
This right now is Decision Community Works right now.
community works, I couldn't clarify community.
Yeah, the board has to.
It's managed,
I think the 2 amenity ones could be information.
Are they decision right now?
so they're right now decision, they're now recommendation.
Recommendation, which is, that's code for, I guess,
Yeah.
decision, yeah.
So you'd like to move what it is right now is recommendations, you'd like it to be in information.
Just information, same as
The
select.
select wouldn't change,
No,
remains as is,
We've already got that discretion.
yeah, same with general select.
Okay, we're good there.
And you'd like to bring the same recommendation, what is recommendations for amenities C and D to be information now.
Okay, and are there amounts that we would want on those?
no, they're
No,
not those.
We would want them just to be treated however and we can simplify right now what this is, what is the process that goes through here to get.
Yeah.
Like, we just want these to be bundled the same.
And board could say, hey, can I put an amount on it?
Yeah, they might ask for that,
Yeah.
but, and we'd be willing to consider that.
and
but we
then
don't-
we'll discuss that at
But we
the
don't,
time.
we'll let them negotiate.
And
We're in open meeting so they can listen to our negotiation strategy.
Southern Pilt goes to the board and that needs to stay because. it's-
Recommendation?
Yeah,
No,
no,
It's not
no,
even seen.
it doesn't even come
Off
to
the table,
EAD,
don't even.
Okay.
comes straight
No.
to, goes straight to the
Yeah.
board, yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't start here.
No, no, no.
That's Southern.
Okay,
Southern Port goes straight to the board.
okay.
It has to because there's a municipality involved.
Yeah,
Okay, that's what we're talking about, yes.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
it's got a whole
Squamish area.
nother process that instead of this one.
yeah.
Another vote that isn't.
The Northern Port, my suggestion was it was dealt with here. I don't know, my two colleagues that are in the north, it's up to them what they think.
Right now, you discuss it here and then it gets recommended to the board right now.
Correct.
All of it.
And what we're saying is essentially this group would become this group for this one. There's still a
Yeah.
pre-discussion
Oh, yeah.
where people are considering it and you're challenging it. You're not just blindly deferring. Anything that gets delegated to this group, even though this might be C and D or whatever it is, A and B are still helping the robustness of that decision.
Yes.
So that the board, yep, okay, but we would like that one to be information as well.
It's I now and it should, and
No, it's not.
it's right, it's recommendation now and we want it I, yeah.
Okay, so basically, and I know this is extra work, but it might end up being is just, what are the criteria where, like if we had to put a process here?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that the notion that for any of these, if there is a specific risk identified, it would go to the board, but the default is that it doesn't.
Good.
Like, because I think you always want to have that off ramp, that if there's something unusual about it, and even if you have a really substantial discussion and you barely agree, the freedom to bring something to the board. Like, they're you as well. They're there as a resource, you know, like, you know, we toss this one around. Because sometimes leaning into giving them some stuff in your area to talk, like, you know, stops other things. But I think the other piece of this, Heather, is a discussion with the board about what does information mean? Don't muck in just out of curiosity. If there's, you know, if there's a significant, you know, because I think sometimes agenda items come and we're just curious about the swimming pool. So we weigh in a way that's just really curious. Let's say, you know,
And that's okay, actually, I think. I
if
mean,
it's a compliment
people feel
or,
like they want to spend their time that way.
I think the risk would be if you
open the door.
You know the board
Mhm.
has a legal duty.
Mhm.
And so being given extended, should you be giving an extended delegated authority, there also comes with an agreement that you're okay if once in a while something is being asked at the board level
Yeah.
and they're going to pull something with questions.
It's not
It's
improper for them
not
to do it.
about accusation, it's just about, I want to check in with my duty here as a board
Yeah.
member, and that's okay.
And sometimes it might be just something that even staff don't know about, like, oh, you know, a municipality might say, did you know that we're about to do that exact thing? Like, because you're not always plugged into what your municipalities are doing. I know some of you connect differently with the municipality. But anyways, would this be something that would be beneficial to you if we could get that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
I just want to pause before you, like, the way the four of you are leaning into doing things differently to get to do things differently is high quality governance. You know, just this notion of, well, the ad hoc way it's been working has been working in some ways, but the discussion around systemizing, as long as it's not bureaucracy, in order to get. Okay. So anything, Heather, the way I see this is we are not making a decision yet. We are giving some direction so that something can come back that you can make an ask to the board. But I would suggest you need to see this again.
Mhm.
You know, and have a discussion again around this. And what I'm gonna suggest is bring one or two issues that you've had and think about how it would work. Like, think about the exceptions, because the big thing that if you want more delegated authority is to assure the board that if you're not sure, you'll bring it to them too. That you will use the broader, you know, they're not smarter than you, I think, but just more heads sometimes is, but just that this isn't an attempt to build a kingdom, because one of the reasons why some organizations don't do this is we work so hard to have positive working relationships with electoral areas and municipalities that by subsetting off decision-making, we don't want to create us versus them. So what I'm going to suggest is as you're going through this process, this is the time to really lean into the board and to show them that this isn't a barrier between you and the board. It's you actually leaning into good governance with your board and actually saving board meeting time.
It's not because the board don't pay any attention to most of this. What it's saving is some staff time.
Okay, thank you. So,
Yeah.
so they're not weighing in your areas very often.
I cannot, in 10 years, I cannot remember any board member having asked any question about an amenities fund recommendation that we've made. I
Do others feel the
honestly
same way?
can't remember.
Has anybody gotten involved in any of your funding decisions in the past? Not that
I can,
okay. So that's almost easier then, because Heather and I are newer to this than the four of you.
Yeah.
This is just codifying what's already happening.
I think so.
I think there was one while I've been here,
Okay,
so. it's not-
and maybe think about why was that one different? Because maybe it can still be covered here, but I think that's helpful for Heather to know, being relatively new in her role, that this is not about changing the system. It's
Well,
about actually creating legal almost protection.
And I'm assuming that board members read through the consent agenda. And I know they do because occasionally things are pulled.
Good, yeah.
And so if a board member saw something and had a question about liability, about risk, then they're at liberty to pull that out.
Yeah.
So,
There was one regarding fire services.
Okay. And that's one that I'm gonna suggest might, even in this model, still go to the board,
Yes.
depending on the nature of it.
Yeah.
Just because of that, the type of funding might be a trigger.
I just, if I can, I'd like some clarification
Don't look at me, she's a smart one.
on directors' reports. See, I was told 10 years ago, if I wanted something to go on the agenda, write a director's report.
Yes.
So I'd made up this little template for myself, director's report from Tony Rainbow, the subject, and then I bang it out. What I'm hearing from Heather is that that's causing too much work. And because half the time in my things that I'm just writing to give my reasons for supporting a funding request. Well, that doesn't need to be.
So this process might be, like, you might have one line on that process where you're supporting it.
Yeah, or I might write a 1-paragraph memo if you like. I could not call it a director's report. If director's report, if that term means that something has to be dealt with a certain way and it creates work, then well, I won't use the term anymore.
I love the question about what's
Yeah.
different.
so,
No, not.
just a minute. So that's why, back in the day when Linda was here, I said to her, like, when I get these requests coming in, somebody sends me an email, they explain everything in the email, I forward it to the CAO, now Angela and Suzanne, and I used to do Natalie too, but anyways, so I forward that request to them. It's all there, written, and all they do then is that request, if it's okayed by Suzanne, Finance, it goes on the agenda. So your constituent, by making the request in writing, email, whatever, they're doing the work for you in a sense, and they're also doing the work for staff. There it is. It's, the request is right there. Explains everything, the amount, what it's for, blah, blah, blah.
So in this process discussion, to you, Heather, how are the director's reports working for you and your team?
When it comes to funding requests as it is now, the passionate preference of staff is that it come in as Russell's described.
As what?
As a
Russell.
request.
It's a letter from, because the letter also clarifies there's authority. It's on the letterhead of the association. There's
So
authority.
you want the association to apply?
Yeah, so it's a letter, we want the association to apply. I understand that at times directors want to put in a record their support for it, and the idea being, well, that happens in the discussion at the table. The request from the staff is that when funding requests come in, they come independently as a letter right now. The real request is we have more of a streamline. That's like what we're talking about in the future. And that streamline could actually include a workflow that area director could make a comment that is with
Comment of support
or
that-
something.
That chunk
But
of that.
right now, how Russell's describing it is the best way, because having a director's report attached is another document to review, edit, approve, and go back and forth on. and it confuses the public because directors' reports appear at a different place in the agenda as correspondence for action, but the action is the same.
So
it
in that
confuses people.
workflow, can you consider the goals of directors' reports, which is I support this?
Yeah, we've
How-
got
how to-
that right here in the
How to
workflow.
keep that,
Yeah.
whether it is the
So,
completed application goes to the
What I
director
also
report.
do with that email, or that I forward it off to them, but I'll also put on there, I want these funds to come from select funds, amenity funds, community works funds, and I support this request.
So if we have a form, as we've discussed, so that.
Simple form, not a big fat ugly form,
A
but
little form with,
Yeah.
and a bit on the bottom for area directors' comments.
Yeah.
Fine. One of the other motivations I had for doing which I called a director's report.
Yeah.
is I've saved it, I've got all those. And
You got the
so
record.
the person that follows me
Mhm.
is gonna have that file.
Yeah.
They can check back and see the money that I've given and my reasons for giving it, because
Yeah.
that's not anything we say at this meeting supporting.
I like that, so
a
you would wanna make
request.
sure that there was a knowledge management piece of that sort of support about why, just that one,
Yeah.
and it might just be that one sentence that Tony's adding to the bottom of,
Yeah,
To clarify, I'm hearing that within a new workflow, we can include the why. Current, meaning that a new workflow that has a form that there's a comment section.
Yeah,
in the
comment
area
section.
director.
Yeah.
I'd have to review that because that is the one elected official prior to a board meeting putting in their, so I just have to clarify.
isn't that what a director's report is?
Well, we don't wanna, these are this director's reports, we need to, what I'd like to say is the conversation with director's report, for the sake of time. We should just say, we need to be clear and define the purpose of the director's report.
Okay.
And let's get that addressed.
Yeah.
Because. And I would like to also say, what it isn't is to manage funding requests coming from nonprofits.
well, that's fine,
Okay, good, we'll
yeah.
we'll design a simple process.
And whatever the process, I would still like it to come to the director first before it.
And it might be a director supports, yes, no, and the comments come after. Anyways, we'll
And
we'll look at what the law
Would you like
allows.
to see it?
We'll look at what the law allows.
Director's reports are a different section of the agenda.
Yeah, okay.
It's an interesting conversation, as I'm ready to do a director report to fund the Lillooet Friendship Center Food Bank.
And
So-
put the
I'm
vote
not
of Friendship
going to
Center,
them.
not send a.
They're not coming to me. I wanna fund that.
You're initiating it.
What's that?
Yeah, because
I'm initiating.
you're initiating it.
Yeah.
And do they
okay.
not want it?
What's that?
Do they not
Why
want
are they
it?
not asking?
Of course they want it.
Then
They
why
need
aren't
it.
they asking for it?
What's that?
Why aren't they writing a letter to ask for it? So staff time on a director's report is half hour to 4 hours. Depending on how it's written and the back and forth between getting it.
Minimum
correct.
$1,000 when you put a director's report in.
I'm telling you, because what happens is Suzanne got in and went, okay, this project, okay, do we own the property? Is it an SLRD asset that this is being built on? Is it code? So we have to ongoing capital operation. Oh, no, it's actually just a nonprofit asking for money. Oh, okay. So if it's just the letter, it makes so much more sense because
Okay, I'll
the
do
checks and
that.
balances. Yeah, I understand why, because it's that vocal support for this and how it's important.
And we will find ways to
We will
capture
find
that. I want to be very clear that what I'm hearing is important to you.
Yes.
Is that your community knows that if you support something, we're not cutting that out. And I want to be clear, I don't hear any of you saying that I want my big ego to, it's about confidence in government is what I'm hearing. That they've got a
Yeah.
representative,
And
so,
it being on the record.
and it being on the record. So
Yeah.
I just want to be clear that as we're systemizing things, we're not taking the personal touch out, but we're also making sure it's not a step in between.
So let me ask you a question then. What comes from this is for you, Heather. What comes from the BRVCA in those basically formatted letters? Is that fine?
For today, yes, and what happens is they pull out questions. Dollar amounts, put them together. Do we have the funds, like whatever funds being, is
Each
it all that-
one of those
yeah.
tells you where it comes from.
Yeah, and then sometimes depending on the thing they're asking for, there's a question of, is it our job is a risk, those sort of
Yeah.
things, yeah.
So when would I ever write a director's report then? What are they for? So don't need to answer that right now.
Yeah, and I've just written actually that down.
Many regions, many
great.
regions.
I could answer it now, but I think we, for the sake of time. but-
Yeah, no, that's
you
fine.
better-
I don't need
better
to answer
go.
right now.
Wanna drive home before
So,
dark.
so I wanna close this. What we've got is, and Heather, I do wanna check in with you that, you know, we've had this session and there's pieces of work sticking to you. I wanna be clear, are these good pieces of work that will streamline things, or is it just another project on an already busy desk? Like,
It's both in the sense
Okay.
that,
so the timing and turnaround, I want you to think about before we end.
yeah, and I think I could not commit to a timing and turning around without my team here,
Yeah.
because I'd be putting the work on
And
them.
please, you and I think, can have a call as well. I can, you know, because we don't need this cast in stone for the next meeting. We need to sort of have the steps and maybe even just I can do up a baby sample form, just that you can take a look and go, never like this, hate that, just the notion of the experience. But what we've got is we're looking at how do requests come in, first of all, making sure that the four of you are so client-centric, but we want to have a system where somebody who doesn't know the four of you can still get into the system. Where they don't have to be hand-delivered by an elected official. You can be an extra benefit. But we shouldn't need a VIP line where somebody who knows you, that's not your intention at all. Somebody should be able to find this, make a request, and it would still come back to you for that approval. But we want the system to be able to run even for those not connected. The next step of it is we're going to bring something back here that asks the board for a more streamlined process. And what you might do, you know, depending on your discussions with your team, Heather, is say, we want to try this for 3 months. Like often it's easier to get approval to do something on a pilot basis than it is to change something forever in the procedure bylaw and everything else like that. The other piece that we haven't really talked about though, and I would encourage the four of you to ask Heather to look at where it could be delegated to staff. Like where is there even a layer behind this that it doesn't even need the four of your time? And just that sort of, you know, like as you're going through this, Heather, so sorry, over to you right now. I got excited on that one.
Well, I just want to say an example is the website maintenance. That happens every year. The letter could come in, I could call you. We could just,
Do it.
next week.
And it might be,
then-
it might be a
and then
dollar
it appears
figure.
in a report on the EAD agenda, so it's
We
very
still need to make sure it
transparent.
feeds back into the recognition so the community knows they've gotten that.
And it always does, so even right now, when funding is approved, the area director is copied on the email that goes to.
But that's
Sometimes it
pretty
was-
new.
Yeah, but so, and we're trying to improve that process.
And that's great.
So I think there's a couple of swim lanes where processes are trying to improve.
Yeah.
Could that be better? Yes. But I didn't want to wait until it gets better just to
Yeah.
get it started.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think I think that there's an example here for the November 11th. There are some things that,
Are time sensitive.
and they can't delegate it to the area director. It can't be delegated to the area director, but it can be delegated to the CAO.
At law, it can't be delegated to you.
Yeah, so by law.
Just to be clear,
By law.
there can't be a delegation to an individual director. It either has to be a committee or a staff person.
So, but the area director is gonna talk to, like, the CAO is gonna talk to the area director.
Is there an amount that, or is it,
And so I thought about that quite a bit when you just talked about turning around that $500 request. I thought, okay, all right, nice, they get the money quicker. That's nice. But I like the public record of it being on the agenda and in the minutes, and for staff, then they get all their requests at one time. So I just assumed they would process them all at one time, and I see that, you know, like I see Natalie's notices going out and I sort of
do
see.
we get them all at the same time?
But so I was trying to decide why I was trying, because my response was like, no, I don't like that, and I'm trying to define why I just, aside from it being different.
It would appear it would appear as a consent on the EAD, so it still would be transparent.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't be,
Held
10
up
minutes of
until-
time of.
Is there a dollar figure of delegating to the CAO, assuming you still get it?
Say under 1,000 or something.
Go ahead, Tony. We need to wrap this up, you guys.
Yeah, we just mentioned the letters that Natalie sends out. I assume that job was given to Natalie because she didn't have enough work to do.
No,
No?
it's not.
Well, I'm being
In a
facetious.
public meeting.
I'm being facetious. No, it's a public- I'm being facetious.
Never miss your sarcasm.
But why was that inserted? You know, it's a public meeting, the amount's approved, and I'm calling the person that's asked for the money to tell them they've got it. So they get a letter 2 weeks' time. So sometimes they get the letter after they got the check. So, you know,
Well,
I think it's.
I think it's a waste.
It was inserted because there was a lot of time being wasted with people following up about whether or not they got the money. Can I
Yeah.
get the money?
Yeah.
You're doing something individually as an area director that's not under your roles and responsibilities. You're choosing to do it because you're really good at engaging your community. The process is about the staff doing it so that then they also know it's been approved and they also know finance is going to take, 2 to 4 weeks to process
Okay.
it. And it prevented 4 follow-up calls on
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
And I really like
Yeah,
this
beautiful.
question, as we're streamlining this, are we streamlining that? Like just this notion.
Okay.
So I'm gonna suggest, when you bring this back, the CAO delegation, let's look at, say, that, then you can talk about it, but what would that look like? And sort of think about your requests. And think about what you could delegate, as long as it flows back into the same system of being captured. Cause you don't want,
The one piece about it, I mean, if they're reoccurring, such as that website one,
Mhm.
but there may be something there that you want to speak to.
why,
Right?
if it's a yes, why are you speaking, like, take the yes for an
Well,
answer.
in support of it.
But if you already got it, what do you need to support it? Yes is a support. Like, I mean, I think we've got to distinguish sort of airtime and
Yeah.
process, because you can still, in the community, you can still say, thank you to staff for quickly approving the, but we shouldn't need to speak to things that were yeses. Like,
So something like, if we delegate something to the CAO, would that appear on would come on what do you call it, consent agenda, would it sometime? Okay.
Then I'm happy with that, because then
Yeah.
that's still fitting in with the monthly.
okay, folks, let's wrap this up because we're gonna be here till you wanna go home sometime today.
Yeah, I've got to go at 3.
before I leave through the chair, I just wanted to say thank you so very much for letting me be a part of your day. Having had the opportunity to have pre-consultation with each of the 4 of you.
Thank you.
Your organization is in extraordinarily good hands. And even ironically, even when we're sort of getting, I don't know about that, it is a desire by the 4 of you to serve your residents. And I've got to tell you, I do a lot of work where that's not the driver, and they should be very proud of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we don't wanna emulate the other folks.
No.
You want to learn and decide if you emulate, but not this one.
Thank
We
you for
want to
taking
be
the time to come on.
Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure to be
We
in
want to be
Pemberton.
the
Thank you.
regional district.
Okay, let's
Other
have a
people
quick
will-
5-minute recess and then we'll get going.
We have to receive the.
Oh, sorry,
Motion to receive.
motion to receive, moved and seconded, call a question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried, thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for coming
Thank
today.
you. My
That was
pleasure.
much better than a Zoom.
Okay. We will bring this meeting back to order and we're on 7.8, request for decision, electoral area directors committee, terms of reference. CAO.
Hello, everyone. Heather Paul, CAO of the SLRD. Great to see you. What's presented in front of us is a request that's been on the books for a long time. The Electoral Area Directors Committee has been operating without a terms of reference. When staff started doing research on the terms of reference, there was one thing that all regional districts really stressed and has become the priority for all of our policy reviews. This was originally presented to the policy committee, and the policy committee asked for referral from the EAD committee before adopting or making recommendations toward it. They wanted to hear from the EAD committee. The key thing about this terms of reference is that it is simple and it is small and it is trying to remove bureaucracy while bringing in those items that have to be in a terms of reference. So what you'll notice in the terms of reference is they'll say, it'll mention delegated authority, but it won't list it all because that's managed elsewhere. And we don't want to have duplicate information in all our documents. as you know, policy and procedures and other documents are currently being reviewed as a governance excellence. And what we're seeing is if we repeat information across policies, then when it changes, we have to find and change it all. And then sometimes things are missed. So that's why you're seeing it incredibly simplified. It's basically just a terms of reference because we need one. And this is the most simplest one that we could find that was recommended by both myself and the Director of Corporate Services. And I welcome any questions.
Tony,
Yeah, I'm just searching through to see that I missed it, but is it automatic that the chair of the SLRD is a member of any committee?
That is a good question. I did
Yeah.
have that asked. I believe the chair of the SLRD may attend, but is not a voting member.
I believe that's right.
And I can get that confirmed. I think
Yeah.
that's fine. As anyone can attend this.
Well, that's interesting. If the chair attends, which our current chair has done, and has contributed to discussion. If other board members wanted to attend, they're able to and sit as part of the committee and contribute to discussion.
I believe it's reserved for only the chair, but what I can do is take that away. I'd like to recognize that the Director of Corporate Services isn't here, is absent unexpectedly.
Yeah, no, fine, that's fine. I just wanted to raise the question.
But I can,
And I think that would
Not
be
voting.
actually up to the chair of this committee. Like you say, so the chair, I've allowed her to be part of the conversation. But that's sort of on my prerogative or the chair's prerogative, whoever's sitting here. Now, when she comes in, I could say to her beforehand, you know, you're here to listen to the discussion, but not be involved in the discussion. And I think if you were to have the whole board here, then what's the point? Right?
The only reason I raise it
Yeah,
is just for clarity, you know,
Yeah.
that I think if other board members come, they come as observers.
yeah,
But
No, I agree.
quite often in organizations, the chair is an ex officio member of a
Right.
committee.
that's what I, that's,
So,
it is the ex officio, the chair is the ex officio.
so then the chair can speak and
Can
vote.
speak.
Can speak.
Can't vote.
Cannot
Can be
vote.
consulted. Can't vote.
Okay,
Can they make motions?
We can find that out.
Yeah.
Now, would this be information that you clarified, or would you want to make the terms of reference extend that? I believe this is actually already in policies and procedures and doesn't need to be in your.
it's in place already,
Yeah.
fine.
yeah.
If it's not in place, it should be clarified somewhere.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No,
Chair, I have one comment, change I'd like to suggest. I did bring this up at the policy committee meeting that we had. Under key information, right close to the beginning,
Which number?
this doesn't actually have a number.
It's
Where the options are, that.
in the information.
Okay, well, you know what? Now, no, farther along, 1.1 establishment. Sorry,
Oh, establishment, okay, yeah.
yeah, because now we're actually into the terms of reference. I was scrolling around on the wrong page. 1.1, the electoral area directors committee, et cetera, et cetera. It's the last line, to make recommendations to the SLRD board pertaining to services paid for one or more of the following electoral ABCD. That narrows it right down to us only being able to make recommendations to the SLRD board about services that are paid for. And I would like that language to be opened up to say, make recommendations to the SLRD board pertaining to any and all matters pertinent to the electoral area A, B, C, D. So if we are talking about something like, let me pick something.
Early.
Not, vegetables growing in a part of area B or something
Fire
like
smart,
the hospital service, pardon me?
fire smart.
Fire smart, sure, just where we've got an issue, a problem, a request, something exciting happening, and we just wanna to talk about it and make some sort of recommendations to the board. We can do that. And it's not necessarily tied to something that we're
Services
paying
paid
for.
for.
The,
Go ahead. Oh, Sal, just a minute, go ahead.
So I did get clarification from Angela and from the template this comes from. That is addressed in services paid. Your constituents pay taxes and those taxes are services. Your constituents receive benefits of pills and things like that. Those are, so it does.
It's already in there.
It's all in there, yeah.
Sal, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's where the confusion is. The services almost feels vague, but it's broad. It's written there in a broad context.
Okay, pertaining, but this is services paid for
Yeah,
by A, B, C, and D. So to me, that narrows it.
the language
Risk
I
is
think could be more
jurisdiction.
inclusive. Could you take a look and get some advice from Angela and see if you can have more inclusive language there? So,
What's an example of something that you would want to bring? Like, you talk about Fire Smart, that's a service you pay for.
not
Not
directly.
really. No, a lot of the fire smarting is through grants that staff, sorry.
Through the chair, Fire Smart is services that are paid for because you are paying for the staffing of protective services doing projects. And some of those projects include Fire Smart, and you're paying for the services of those staff to apply for grants that will enable that to be made. So the operational services, how they decide to fund that doesn't remove this group from making a decision on it. And most of those fundings actually go to the group to approve the grant funding.
Right.
So the services is being paid for because you're funding the department that's responsible for that delivery of that.
Yeah, so you,
Where it would be, if it was out of our jurisdiction, then it's about advocacy, and that's where services paid for is trying to address, is trying not to be vague enough so that you can do stuff that are outside of the jurisdiction. And I don't know, doing Fire Smart on Crown land. Couldn't just walk in and do Fire Smart on Crown land. There's a different jurisdiction that has to be addressed there.
so we can't talk about that then?
No. You still have your questions, Sal?
yeah, let's just talk about advocacy. That services are paid for,
Yes.
and I got a whole list of them up in our area. From mining to roads to FSRs to MODI, and the list goes on and on. Forestry. Well, how does that fit into the electoral area directors?
Thank you, through the chair. Advocacy is from my understanding delegated on a board level so that the board decides that they are going to collectively advocate for that topic. And
What I'm saying is, because this is talking about related to matters and activities and issues. Where that is, for area A, that is the biggest issue, just those things I just talked about. So we can't talk about it here and then say, make a recommendation to the board to advocate.
You know, I think that this advocacy thing, so if we have to get permission from the board to advocate for something in our area, it just takes forever. Like we should have a blanket yes from the board that each area director has the authority to advocate on behalf of their areas, on behalf of the board. Because if you have to come every time, if Sal wants to have advocate on something, MOT, whatever, and he has to come to get board approval every time. Am I misreading this or? Because otherwise it could, you never get anything done. Go ahead.
The way you present it absolutely sounds logical, and it's one of those, oh, look, another roadblock in my way, so I can affect change for my community. However, an individual advocating that's outside of the collective board decision, it limits, kind of goes against the idea of the democratic process of the board. And when there's other advocacies happening on behalf of that, it can actually, interfere with conversations that staff are having with the ministries. So if there's a larger project plan and, okay, we're gonna advocate for these things, and then we make that plan for the year and the board decides, and then individually, not you, because I think a lot of the work that's being done is effective and for your community, it has the potential to interfere or actually has a legal risk. Because it hasn't been decided collectively as a democratic process to advocate on behalf and prioritized on, what are we really gonna ask Modi for? What are we really gonna, what do we need them to do?
Well, I'm gonna ask him to fill the potholes.
Yeah.
Well,
That's the first
I
start.
don't wanna be too restrictive because I also.
I mean, and
don't
there
like
was no way,
potholes.
no way at UBCM, when I'm in the same room as Adrian Dix, that I'm not gonna stand up and advocate for the Lillooet District Hospital. Like, there's no way in the world I was gonna run back and ask,
So
I don't think
this is
that's
interesting,
okay,
so, Tallaght just got $21 million to move forward with their mining project. They're gonna have meetings, and I'm gonna be attending those meetings. Do I have to get board approval to go to their meetings? Cause I'll be advocating for the community when I go to those meetings. Like, I think we need to look at that a lot. Look at the OCP, the new one that's coming, because we went through all that, and every one of those topics, mining, forestry, and the list goes on and on. The SLD will advocate, the SLD will advocate. So I think we can put processes in place, just like I emailed you about what I was doing last week. Right, so you were informed, you could have said something, but I'm like, anyway, the question is, the advocacy side for us is very important in rural areas. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's, you name it, it's important.
Even to bring it down to another level.
Can I
Yeah.
Go ahead.
the chair, and we wanna hold an order of speakers here.
I'll follow, if I may just comment, because I do have to leave, but I wanted to hear and then just make one more comment on advocacy around this terms of reference. But to Director Rainbow, please say you haven't said your part on this.
Well, Sal's talking about government, advocacy with government. As you know, we've got a major industrial project, WLNG, in our area. And I've met with executives from that company a few times now, and I'm advocating for our community. Should I have got board approval for that?
So just if I may, you've mentioned 9 separate items you're advocating for in this discussion. Like just as so can you appreciate that as passionate as you are about that, that is dangerous? 9 discrete asks just in this discussion. All I'm suggesting in this, I think, is a discussion with the board as a whole about advocacy. And the end of the day, what sounds like fettering your discretion or limiting you, what if you got the board's support behind the things you're doing? But if everything matters, nothing does. Like at the end of the day, there, one of my favorite quotes, and it relates to advocacy, but it's related to strategy. The essence of strategy is deciding what not to do. Now you can have discussions, but the SLRD has very specific regional needs that they're advocating for at UBCM or otherwise. And I don't hear any of you wanting to get in the way of that, but that can be the effect of a diffused advocacy. I do think, though, that through the CAO or the chair of this committee, highlighting that this discussion has been had and how do advocacy asks get actioned by the board? Like, how do you get in the queue? When are you out of bounds? Because inside this room, I can tell you just as an ex-lawyer, there's some risks. Your motives are good. I want to be very clear on that. But I think figuring out how you channel this. The other thing is, everything that matters to you doesn't have to go through this committee. You know, when we talk about advocating for something, you can go directly to the board and ask for that too. You know, we're just talking about where this committee adds weight. So if you think it's an advocacy initiative that the four of you share together, there may be some benefit, but I would suggest having a discussion at the board level about advocacy strategy and where this committee fits into it. Because again, it is a big part of what you do, whether it's for the hospital with Lillooet, you know, and adding your voice. What are the things that are in or out of bounds? Because you might be able to get some general direction that, hey, if you're talking about hospitals, carry on. Because we've decided that regional healthcare, we don't do it, but we've decided that's one of our top advocacy initiatives. And some strategic plans actually put their top 5, 10 advocacy, and it might be mining, you know, attracting. My suggestion though is, as much as you want to have more discretionary authority, you also have to lean into the fact that you're part of a collective. Even on municipal councils, individual elected officials don't get to go off and ask for things. So this isn't something that's unique to elected office. Again, just this, but I would suggest that there may be some, just having a discussion about how the board uses its power, because you might be able to get permission from your colleagues to do this on a one-off or specific topic that matters.
I think this is just slowing, you know, our ability to advocate for our constituents. If I don't go and meet with highways about the conditions of our roads, and I have to come here and get permission.
But the conditions of your roads is an operational issue. That's not even an advocacy issue. That should be, that's something that staff should be working
Well, they're
with us.
working on it too, but it's just, I don't know. I think we're making this far more complicated than it actually is. But that's just my opinion. I think the way we've been, you know, dealing with people, Sal's, you know, extremely diligent and looking after his constituents, as are the rest of us. Personally, I don't think that should change. So.
And somewhat of this might be in the nature of, because you're the only elected representative in the community, right? And you get invited to things, and like the meeting that's coming up with the band about a property area B. I wouldn't want to say to them, well, I'll have to wait until after the October board meeting, we can talk about that in November. Like, we're just trying to work through it. But right now, what we're doing is some information sharing, and then I wouldn't go there representing the SLRD board. I'll go there with the information that I've gotten and get some, and then come back for some guidance, but not necessarily on the timeline of the board meetings though, right?
Well,
You're speaking to, you're an elected official,
Yeah.
speaking to an elected official.
Right.
And it's a little different.
Right.
than- You're receiving an issue that is a struggle for, and it actually addresses the relationship building that we want to address.
Right.
So it's a little, if you were having a meeting with the CAO of that organization, that would be different. So having the meeting with the staff, it would be more, that would be my role. Or that would be planning's role to talk about.
Yeah.
So we're here to support you with the briefing of the information that you know, so you can meet with the elected official and know that we are here to support.
Yes.
I want to be clear that this isn't a roles and responsibilities document. This is a terms of reference for how the meeting, for the meeting.
Yeah.
And we've been really vague about delegated authority in hopes that delegated authority might change. So we haven't specifically put in what delegated authority is. It's about the meetings itself and how they're managed. I think that the advocacy can be addressed outside, and what we've done is made this so simple so that it's not restrictive.
So for that first paragraph.
But the only problem is, we mulled around the, you know, can we be more broad, but more broad actually gives us into out of jurisdiction and legally we can't.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so
This language is fairly common and it's clumsy as all get out, but it is language that captures generally how these committees function.
This is why we wanted this to happen after the conversation that happened earlier today, because I knew this is a very benign. We don't have a terms of reference to run this meeting, but I knew it would bring out whatabouts, and that's being addressed through the other process. Okay.
yeah, one of the things
Sorry.
that,
I'm sorry, I have to leave. I
Yeah.
have a commitment that I can't avoid. I'm generally in support of
oh,
this.
we gotta do the two BRBCA ones.
Oh, jeez.
Right.
We gotta do them first.
Okay. So let's finish this discussion,
Yeah.
so, sorry, Chair.
Well, I'll move that well, whatever that option was.
So I know they're asking for recommendations here.
The terms of reference, just finish.
Just in terms of reference.
I'll move those two that's in 7.8.
I'll second them.
Moved and seconded, call the question. All in favor? Opposed, motion carries.
And my comment would be that at some point we have to talk about advocacy at the board level.
Good catch.
Good to hear the chair of the policy development.
That would be fine as well.
Great.
Okay, so should we look at?
8.1 and 8.2.
And where are you going?
Okay,
Are we on 8.1, 8.2?
yeah, we'll move to that so you can move ahead.
To declare a conflict of interest, as my wife is on the board of the BRBCA and my daughter works for the organization.
Okay, 8.1. By the time he walks out, I'll have finished it. Request for funding, Bridge River Valley Community Association, Full Bridge Group Community or Committee Seed Funding.
I'll move that.
Okay,
I'll
Seconded.
second it. This is 2,500 from electoral area A select funds to help.
okay,
with cost-
moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. 8.2, request for funding, Bridge River Valley Community Association, BRBCA Preservation and Conservation Fund. Pardon me?
Can I speak to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to note from staff that they've have some clarifications that they were looking for. And they just wanted to share some information, it's not a recommendation against. It's information to share. I'm sorry, I didn't know we were gonna go this fast in this, I'm sorry. So the context would be in comments for awareness, wildfire insurance was deemed readily available across BC. The province did not make impacts from the 2023 wildfire seasons eligible for disaster financial assistance. This is because insurance was widely available and they are required to ensure tax dollars are used appropriately. The concerns and flags are that the supports requested in this letter, grass seeding and debris cleanup, are for use on private property. So this would be funding private property use. And this is just so that this is understood. The precedent for providing funding covering insurable losses on private residents just needs to be strongly considered. What precedence is being made when the choice to not insure, there's still funding available through this process on your private property. If the request was to be considered given above, it would be the process by which the 9 properties are selected. Our data shows that there's 52 properties that were impacted. So what's the process for the 9 properties to be selected?
Right.
Thinking of, and perhaps a motion that clarifies that, so it doesn't slow it down by another month. Although I would like to appreciate that at UBCM, we were very clear with the province that this idea of the private property owner being responsible for cleanup of ash and asbestos and things that could be damaging to the overall environment and community needs to be considered in the future to be funded and supported and not be left to the private property owner to decide to walk away and do nothing, because it does impact the environment. That doesn't help this, but I do want to say that that's something that we're advocating for. The support for the province's funding water sampling in the area was to determine if there were any health impacts to the broader community because of the remaining debris on the landscape. And at this point, there's no evidence to date of any impact to the water quality threatening human health. At this point. However, I believe that seeding, we're in grass seeding time. Like this is the time to do it. So
Yes.
my concern being if it's delayed another month and you're losing the window to seed the grounds. I'm not a gardener.
Yeah, I know.
Now's a
I
good
mean,
time to do it.
Winter comes earlier up there than it does here, for sure.
So would it be helpful to add something like, with criteria for determining which properties may clear to the community, or some way to make that decision transparent?
So
Because when you read in here, it's working hard to raise additional funds to augment the grass seeding program and to support debris removal for 9 uninsured or underinsured properties. They have some funding already. Both areas of focus are collective environmental concern. That's true, actually.
which is what we discussed with the province. So I think the first thing is to consider the precedent of private land. And it's just from comment. It also could be considered deferring to staff and delaying a month. My concern of that being you missed the grass seeding window.
Yeah.
I didn't understand, the reason I didn't jump into move that, so I don't really understand the numbers here, you know, what exactly they were getting at. An additional amount of up to 15,000, while the debris removal for the remaining 9 properties requires 50,000, representing 50% of the projected costs. But so 50,000 is, they need 100,000 for
They have some committed funding.
The second page shows some of the donations and fundraisings that have been done to date and disbursements of those and what's left over, and then what's needed for the future programming.
I'm just trying, my computer just blew up here.
Want to share?
Nah. Craziness.
Is it on fire?
Yeah, anyways.
Yeah. So that's the. So that's donations to
Yeah.
date, disbursements to date, surplus. So the points that were just highlighted was the decision of 9 properties. It sounds like the remaining that haven't cleaned up. The impact on the community members who might have cleaned up out of their own pocket, and then this private property being funded. However, keep in mind that we ourselves went to the province saying this is a community impact. And then those are the kind of the 2 or 3 things to consider is 9 properties. Private
So
property.
without this 15,000, and does that like eliminate their ability to finish the cleanup?
It looks to me like there's a surplus, so I think it would limit. I think by limiting the funding, you're limiting the ability. There is money. There's just
But not enough to finish the project.
Mhm.
See, on the next page, it says grass seeding program, cost 25, committed 12, required 13. And they're asking for 15, so that it didn't match to me. I just wasn't sure.
But that's the debris removal is 50, right?
Yeah, but the grass seeding,
Yes, 25.
Yeah, we're not seeing the whole budget here. But you know that they've gotten money from other sources, there's some donations and so on, this is great. I'm just assuming that they are asking for exactly what they need and not any more. Or perhaps it's as much as Area A can afford out of there.
but it says they require 13 on the last, but just above
Yes,
Mr. Moritz'
yes.
signature, required 13,000. In the body of the letter, it says requires an additional amount of up to 15,000. So they're fudging that a little
Yeah.
bit in case they could. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
And I think I agree that if they see, disregarding the fact it's private property, it still has net environmental benefit.
Not for the whole community.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
so I'm good, I moved this.
Okay, moved it. Tony seconded.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moved in second, call a question. All in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Drive safely.
Yeah, well, I'll try.
You know, Tony's.
Oh, yeah, good that you got your wine, you were thinking.
Almost.
Okay, good travels, Tony.
I'm gonna admit Colin now.
Oh, okay, we're going back to Colin.
Suzanne.
Back to 7.4.
Cancel my 3:30 meeting.
See you in November.
Yeah, have a great holiday.
Oh, yeah, have fun at the game. Sorry.
Two games.
England,
Football. Football.
So select funds report, right?
7.4.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the newest select fund report. I'll, in the sake of time, I'll just maybe open up for questions on this report, if there's any.
I'd like to say I have no questions.
So,
I'm good.
okay, motion to receive. Moved and seconded, call a question. All in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Thank you very much, Colin.
We still have.
Now we go on to the next one. 7.5, information report. 2024 second quarter financials, EAD services.
Yes, this is the second quarter financials for the EAD services. That runs from January to June of this year. Everything is on budget, so I'll open up for questions on any of these as well.
I've got no questions, but I just want to compliment on the line items where you summarized them.
Yeah, that's really,
You also did that
really informative.
at the board meeting also for the quarterly report. Excellent. Thank you very much.
No problem, I'm glad to hear it's helpful.
Seconded,
Yeah, ditto, thank you.
okay. Moved and seconded, call a question. All in favor? Opposed, motion carried. Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
And
Yeah.
7.6 has been deferred?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So now we go down to 8.3.
You got it.
Request for funding, Gun Lake Ratepayers Association. Additional funding for water quality testing on Gun Lake and watershed. Sal, you want to speak to this or is it self-explanatory?
It's self-explanatory.
Okay,
Yes, it kind of emulates the first one that was done.
okay, you're gonna move it
Yeah,
then?
I'll move that.
Seconded,
And
okay, moved and seconded, call the question. All in favor, opposed, motion carried, thank you. Request for funding, Royal Canadian Legion Branch 66, Lillooet, 2024 Remembrance Day.
And I'd like to move that $500 to Lillooet Region Branch 66 for their wreath and poppy campaign from Select Funds Area B.
We got moved and seconded.
Yeah,
Call the question, all in favor? Opposed, motion carried.
could I just make a comment on it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I went and picked up the wreaths and at the Legion at the curling rink with Mark Lampin, and I was impressed with what they've set up in there now.
There's some good stuff going on there. Thank you, Sal. I'll pass that back.
Okay, 9, decision on late business, none. Late business, none. Director's notice of motion, none. And Tony left, so we can't adjourn.
Adjourn, motion to
Okay,
adjourn.
motion to adjourn, moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor? We are adjourned.